Cardinal Virtues, War of the Submarine, Book 1. Written by R.G. Roberts. Narrated by A.J. Shuck. Part 3. Temperance. 20. First Moves. Entering the mouth of the Strait of Malacca, Fletcher steamed 2 miles ahead of the Enterprise strike group. Bella Wood, the cruiser, was ahead of the carrier by 2,000 yards, with John Finn and then Kidd bringing up the rear. Their formation speed settled out at 31 knots, the top speed every ship could steam. Wincing, Nancy imagined Bella Wood straining at the seams. The early Bull Run-class cruisers just weren't as fast as General Dynamics planned. The later ships could make the promised 35 knots, but Bella Wood was second in her class. Without ripping out both her shafts and main reduction gears, there was no way to speed her up. Nancy sat back in her chair on the bridge and watched the sunset, the faint whine of happy gas turbine engines drifting in through the open bridge wing door to her right. Her watch team, plussed up for the 18-hour transit through the Strait of Malacca, watched the horizon and their radars for contacts. Tactically, a nighttime transit was the child of a great idea and a nightmare. Daytime transits minimized contact misidentification, but darkness remained the best way to sneak up on someone, particularly when there were a lot of ships around. The Chinese knew they were coming. The communist regime tended to execute governmental idiots. But Nancy would consider it a victory if they got to the South China Sea faster than China expected. She just wasn't sure what would happen when they arrived. The phone to her right rang. Nancy snatched it without letting her eyes leave the horizon. "Captain." "Ma'am, it's the XO, Ying Mai said. "News just broke. Hong Kong's declared independence." "Is that confirmed?" Nancy asked. "Third Fleet Battle Watch reported it," Ying replied. The XO was in the Combat Information Center, while Nancy stayed on the bridge. They'd swap in a few hours so each could keep an eye on the big picture. "Intelligence seems torn. There's also reports of the Chinese army firing on protesters in Beijing." "Great. Just great." Nancy looked over her shoulder as the officer of the deck talked to another ship on the bridge-to-bridge radio. Lieutenant Junior Grade Marcy Matthews was on watch, and she didn't need a lot of supervision. Her exchange with the other ship was professional and short. "Yeah, China's going to pieces." Nancy propped her feet up on the window ledge in front of her. "Okay," she said. "This doesn't change our mission. Let's get through the Somme. Admiral McNally can deal with the rest." "Let the Admiral deal with it, aye." Ying's smile was audible. "Better him than me." "Me too," Nancy breathed, and then hung up the phone. International relations were something she studied in college, not her job in the real world. Her job was to put warheads on foreheads, if her nation called upon her to do so. Nancy wasn't sure if she wanted to stay in the Navy past 20 years, just 4 more, or if she wanted to do something else when she grew up. Command had always been her goal, but seeing the Navy shit on her husband for doing the right thing soured her a bit on this business. "Combat bridge. Any submerged contacts?" Marcy asked through the tactical intercom. Nancy didn't bother to turn her head as the tactical action officer replied, "Nothing we can hear through our own noise bridge." Nancy suppressed a smile. Her combat systems officer was on watch, and CSO got a mite testy when asked silly questions. Yet again, Nancy wished for a towed sonar array. But, short of Santa Claus showing up with a sleigh full of hydrophones, she was out of luck. "Captain, Porbandar has closed to within 5 miles of the formation. They're paralleling our course," Marcy said. Nancy sat up straight. "They have?" "Yes, ma'am. We've got a good visual now. Track 5097 on your display." Frowning, Nancy glanced at the repeater over her chair. Porbandar was the Indian destroyer that agreed to remain 10 miles away from them just a day and a half earlier. What the hell are they playing at? Marcy winced. "No idea, ma'am." That was rhetorical. Nancy softened the words with a smile before picking up the phone to call her XO again. Ying answered on the second ring. Combat, XO. XO, our Indian friend is back again. Wake up the Crippies and see if they can figure out who Porbandar is talking to. You got it. Thanks, Ying. Nancy hung up again and returned to staring at the horizon. She didn't need this right now. The Enterprise strike group was en route towards a shooting match with the Chinese. Did the Indians want a seat at the table? Or just to watch? Kansas got redeployed to Armistice Station to investigate their sudden silence, Captain Tanya Tenaglia said, dropping into a seat on Tripoli's flag bridge. Tanya was the deputy commander of Expeditionary Strike Group 15, a surface warfare officer with 24 years' experience, almost all of it in amphibious warships, ships designed to carry and deploy Marines. Unlike her boss, she was right at home on USS Tripoli, LHA-7. The red-haired, dark-eyed woman fit in on the helicopter carrier's flag bridge like an alligator did water. She was even short enough that she didn't duck going through watertight doors. If Tanya found it galling to work for a submariner who found that same bridge at least 3 times too large for comfort, she didn't let that show. Rear Admiral Lower Half Marco Rodriguez barked out a laugh, scratching at the 5 o'clock shadow he always seemed to sprout. He was a Hispanic man of medium height, with hair as long as Navy regulations let him keep it, and dark eyes that gave incompetent subordinates nightmares. I bet they fucking loved that. I expect Enterprise will cry for a fast attack soon. Tanya folded her hands and ignored his swearing. Do we offer up lionfish? Hell no, Marco said. First, I'm an asshole who likes to keep my toys. Second, it wouldn't do them any good. If I read that link display right, Enterprise's strike group will be in the Somme within the hour. Lionfish couldn't get there soon enough to matter a good goddamn. You're reading the display correctly, sir, Tanya grinned. Apparently even submariners can be taught. Hey, even I fucking know that the new boats have Link 18. Look, Lionfish is up with us, like a competent submariner damned well should be. Marco pointed at the icon representing the attack submarine attached to his command. An expeditionary strike group was a lot less impressive than a carrier strike group. Marco commanded a helicopter carrier and an amphibious transport docking ship. A dock landing ship, LSD, rounded out his quartet of marine-carrying amphibious ships, but he left that behind when ordered to sprint north. LSDs were just too slow. Marco did have 2 destroyers along as escort, plus a lone Zero-class submarine, Lionfish. Sexy or not, the Tripoli group was his, and scheduled exercises with the Australian Navy put them in the southern Indian Ocean when the call came to head to Taiwan. Timing, Marco knew, was everything in this business. Marco Rodriguez knew he was rough around the edges. He swore too much, drank to excess, and was a submariner whose knowledge of Marines consisted of avoiding them in bars. He still wasn't sure how he ended up an admiral at all, unless it was because he was just that competent. It certainly wasn't because he was great at making friends. He liked to pretend he was slower than he was, too. Marco's hard exterior hid a studier, one who'd never admit how much he loved nuclear power school. For example, he knew that Satellite Link 18 was the child of the Navy's older link systems and cooperative engagement capability. It allowed ships and submarines to trade track data in real time. The Navy could cover the globe in link coverage if they wanted to, but ships in the Indian Ocean didn't need to be distracted by what some idiot destroyer driver got up to in the Atlantic. Ships and subs could even shoot off another unit's track, which was something Marco still found amazing. He grew up in a world where submarines had to hear something to kill it. Now, they could hide and let a surface ship or aircraft do the dirty work. How much longer until we hit the Sunda Strait? He asked. 11 hours, Tanya frowned. Enterprise will blow past us a couple hours later, and then we'll follow them around. Marco glowered. But not catch them. No, sir. Amphibs are just too slow. How do you skimmers fucking live? Marco made a show of yawning. I feel like I'm out for a Sunday afternoon crawl. Tanya laughed. We entertain ourselves by confuddling submariners. That much is working. This is a damned slow way to go to war. Presumed war, she said. China might be too busy fighting itself to fight us. Do you really think our luck's that good, Tanya? Marco rolled his eyes. Nothing's that goddamned easy, and the Chinese are sure as fuck going to take someone down with them. Your optimism astounds me, sir. Damn straight it does. Marco heaved himself out of his chair. All right, I'm going to go catch some shut-eye. Make sure the Battle Watch doesn't do anything fuck-tarded while I get my beauty rest. Tanya laughed and opened the watertight hatch for him. No fuck-tardedness, sir. Though I do think that's your beast rest, isn't it? Careful, missy, or I'll get you and your fucking dog, too. Marco paused in the hatch to mock glower. And don't you start on mixed metaphors. I'm an admiral, and I get to say whatever stupid things I want. Admiral, can you even find your stateroom without my help? It's a big ship. Oh, fuck off. Grinning, Marco headed down the passageway, hung a left, and then realized that flag country was to the left and down a deck. Damn it, these stupid surface ships. 3 hours into the Somme, just after 1 a.m. local time, courtesy of a time zone change that brought them deeper into the wee hours of the morning, Nancy swapped places with her XO. Comfortable in her seat in Fletcher's Combat Information Center, she reviewed enlisted evaluations and kept an ear open for trouble. The Tactical Action Officer, Lieutenant Commander David Attar, sat to her left, monitoring every ship sailing within 32 nautical miles of the strike group. At the north end, the wide end of the cone, the Somme was spacious, but then the strait necked down to less than 1.5 nautical miles. That sounded like a lot of space until you realized that over 300 ships transited through that choke point daily. That equaled 13 ships entering the Somme per hour. Some were huge oilers and container ships that made Nancy's destroyer look like a bathtub toy. Others were commercial fishing boats, private yachts, and the ever-present dhows used for fishing, tourism, and anything imaginable. Together, those ships all crammed into a 550 nautical mile long superhighway. Transiting at night didn't lessen the traffic either. The Somme was the nautical equivalent of jumping on Interstate 95. Everyone drove fast, no one signaled, and you just hoped ships would stay in their imaginary lane. Captain, SSES just called. Satellite imagery captured an Indian surface action group underway from Brunei. Intel says they had a port visit there, Lieutenant Commander Attar said. Nancy looked up. I thought that port visit lasted until the 15th. Apparently they left early and got underway 16 hours ago. Weird. Nancy glanced at the large screen tactical display in front of the command consoles and CIC. One was zoomed in to 32 nautical miles, but the other was at 128. The Indians could travel a long way in 16 hours, about 320 nautical miles if they averaged 20 knots, but Fletcher couldn't see them unless someone else had a radar track. What's our range to Brunei? Attar clicked a few buttons. About 1,100 nautical miles. Nancy felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease. Say they're transiting at 20 knots, that gives us closure of 51 knots. Easy math says about 21 hours from their underway until we meet them. So 5 hours from now? Sounds about right. Send it to Enterprise. Nancy studied the tactical display for a long moment. Traffic was heavy but predictable, and the XO was on the bridge to babysit the watch team if needed. She turned back to the evaluations. She only had 2 Master Chiefs on board, but they were both superstars. Their evaluations were due at the end of the month, and Nancy liked to get things done early. Armistice Station was 4 hours ahead of Greenwich Mean Time, which meant the decision-makers back home were supposed to be awake. Alex had no idea if the Navy noticed or cared when Armistice Station dropped off the map, but he figured the State Department might take note that they were short one annoying know-it-all diplomat. Had they tried to reach out? There was no knowing. The hours of silence were unnerving. The station was too quiet. Normally, Armistice Station's nightlife rivaled any major city. Tonight, tourists returned to their hotels early, and the clubs were empty. Alex had never seen the tubes so barren at 2300. Even the outer tubes weren't full of drunks. The number 3 outer tube, this one decorated with pictures of whales, slid to a stop, and Alex waited for the chime before leaving his seat. Slinging his bag over his shoulder, he stepped out into the Newell tube and hung a left. He passed Rocco's, trying not to think about his last days on Kansas, and headed up a set of stairs into Sequest Fitness. The fitness club was quiet too, with just one person behind the desk. She took a cursory look at Alex's membership card before returning to some game on her phone. Tucking the card away, Alex headed into the locker room, bypassing the area full of treadmills, free weights, and other exercise machines. The outer wall was fully glass, offering a view into 300-foot deep water no other station could match. Back when he first arrived on the station, Alex was mesmerized. Powerful outside lights let patrons see fish, small subs, and sea life gently waving in the current. For a submariner, a window into the ocean was the height of luxury, and Alex loved it. But the next view was better. Changing into his bathing suit, Alex shoved his bag and clothes into his locker and hurried to the pool. The world's news media laughed when Armistice Station installed an Olympic-sized pool underwater, but that pool was a thing of beauty, and its bottom was glass, perfectly clear. Swimming there felt like you were skimming near the bottom of the ocean, just with no need for a tank or fins. The Sequest pool was Alex's favorite place on Armistice Station, and he swam at least once a day. Alex was a qualified diver. His first submarine, USS Virginia, couldn't get enough enlisted sailors through the submarine scuba course, so Alex volunteered. He even kept up his qualifications across 3 submarines and 2 shore duty stations, despite no requirement to do so. He liked to swim, and diving was fun, particularly here at Armistice Station, where there were 3 different dive boats and 2 dive operations out on the platforms. But there was something special about being so close to the ocean without having to wear a mask. The pool was almost empty, an unexpected perk of babysitting an admiral and a politician. For a moment, Alex almost forgave the Navy for dropping this summit right in his lap, Admiral Hamilton and all. Diving into the water for the first time in 3 days, for the first time since Hamilton's arrival, felt almost sinful. Swimming was simple. No one could bother him. He didn't feel overcrowded by people, the worst part about living on this station, and Alex just concentrated on the water. One stroke, then another. 45 minutes later, Alex could almost forget he had to face Admiral Hamilton in the morning. Pleasantly tired, he climbed out of the pool. Maybe now he could sleep. After a shower and a change of clothes, Alex exited the fitness center, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He passed the outer tube station and paused before deciding to walk the long way back to his quarters in Habitat 2, off Earl Tube. Might as well take advantage of the quiet. He passed a few people, mostly couples heading back from late dinners. Seeing them made acidic bitterness rise. Here he was, on shore duty, the time the Navy said he was supposed to recharge. But his family was thousands of miles away in Groton, Connecticut. Talking to them on the phone daily, even by video, wasn't the same. He hadn't seen Nancy, Bobby, or Emily in 4 months. Bobby, Roberta, named for her grandmother, was starting to look at colleges, and he couldn't be there. Worse yet, neither could Nancy. She was on deployment, rushing from the Med to the South China Sea. Leave it to his wife to be where things were hottest, just when Alex was caught on the ass end of nowhere. Blaming Admiral Hamilton for that wasn't really fair either. Honesty compelled Alex to admit this little gift could be traced right to Chris Kennedy's door. Kennedy would like this damned place, he thought. Hell, he got drunk as a skunk the 3 hours he was here. He'd fit right in. Except tonight. It was still too quiet. Alex turned out of the Newell tube and into Matera, and almost ran right into a French Marine. "Excusez-moi," the Marine said as they both jumped aside. "My fault." Alex reseated his bag on his shoulder. The Marine hurried off. Why was a French Marine wandering around so late, particularly in uniform? Sailors wanted to shed their uniforms before going on liberty. Surely French Marines were the same. Alex barely started puzzling over that before he heard more voices speaking in French. Coming around a bend, he spotted another group of Marines, this one outside the Armistice Excelsior. Alex cocked his head. The Excelsior was the nicest hotel on the station, and one of the most expensive in the world. Rooms there cost almost as much as Alex made monthly, and the Navy took good care of its commanders, even the disgraced ones. He couldn't understand a word they said, but the crowd next to the Marines seemed much less French. Two gentlemen around his own age stood at the edge of the crowd, muttering to one another. Both looked tired and disgruntled. One wore old-fashioned checkered pajamas, no surer sign that he had money, and the other looked like he dressed in the dark, in sweatpants and a blazer. The others in the crowd were equally disjointed. They wore a hodgepodge of clothing, and a few seemed to have forgotten their shoes. Alex inched closer, sticking to the shadows. Once in earshot, he caught snippets of conversation. "Going to sue the hotel if this takes much longer," the pajama-clad man said. "Really, they should compensate us for this," a blonde woman said to a brunette. The blonde wore an elegant blue evening gown. Her companion wore a bright green robe and slippers. The brunette yawned. "I just want to go back to bed. Still don't understand why they drag us out here in the middle of the night," another woman said. She sounded British to Alex. Or was she Australian? Her husband was definitely Australian. "Rank insanity," he replied in a thick accent, rubbing a bald spot on his head. "Is this going to take much longer?" the sweatpants and blazer-wearing man stepped out of the crowd to ask. "Just a few more minutes, monsieur," one of the Marines replied. Another Marine, this one looked like an officer, said something to two of her men, who hurried inside the hotel. There were still over a dozen Marines watching over a crowd of 3 times their size, all of whom were native English speakers, Alex realized. He heard a few British and Australian accents, but most seemed American. Alex glanced at his phone. It was just past midnight. Was there a problem at the Excelsior? The officer stepped forward. She reminded Alex of Camille Dubois, nowhere near as stunning, but with the same haughty confidence. "Messieurs et mesdames, if you will come this way, we will escort you to your transportation," she said. "Please, follow Lieutenant Caron." "Transportation?" Pajama Man asked. "To where?" "Off the station, of course," the officer replied. "International agreements have been reached, requiring all American and British nationals to depart Armistice Station immediately." "What?" Several people spoke at once. "I'm not leaving without my belongings." "We're Australian, mate," the bald Aussie said. "Does that mean we can go back to bed?" "No, you must leave as well." The officer's glare swept over the crowd, and as she gestured, multiple Marines stepped forward. Holy shit, they were armed. With pistols only, but what the fuck were armed French Marines doing on an independent station? Something weird prickled up Alex's spine. The crowd hissed, drawing back. Alex did the same, heart pounding. He knew of no international agreements that required Americans and their closest allies to leave Armistice Station. The station was well into international waters and governed by local laws, what few there were. Someone would have gotten word to Alex about this, wouldn't they? Suddenly, the lack of cell service and internet seemed a lot less innocent. Heart-pounding, Alex tuned out the crowd's continued arguments. Sleepy civilians would give in and obey armed Marines. He couldn't help them. Instead, he retraced his steps silently, barely daring to breathe. Finally, he made it back to the Newell tube. There was no one else in sight, so he hurried back to the outer tube joiner. Thank God the outer tubes ran on autopilot. One arrived within 2 nerve-wracking minutes, and Alex jumped in without looking at its destination. Once the door slid shut, he pulled his phone out of his pocket and dialed Steph. Local calls still worked. Only off-station calls were disabled. Yeah, not an accident. 3 rings later, Steph picked up. "Yes, sir?" "Sorry to wake you, Steph, but some weird-ass shit is going on," Alex said. "French Marines are pulling Americans, Brits, and Aussies out of the Excelsior and telling them they have to leave the station." "What?" Covers rustled as she sat up. "That's... what?" "Hell if I know. They're claiming there's some international agreement." Alex watched the rail as the outer tube reached 30 knots, sailing around the edges of Armistice Station. "Something's fishy as fuck here." "I hear you there," Steph said. Something clanked in the background. "I'll be ready to roll in a sec. What do you want me to do?" Alex hesitated. What could he do? He had too little information and so many questions. Was this happening station-wide? Were the French acting alone? Could this just be one obnoxious, overreaching officer? No way. "Meet me at the Hilton. Grab Secretary Fowler and his aide. I'll get the admiral," he said. "Call Jesse and have him wake up Olson and Bradshaw, then go grab the security details. Tell them to meet us at the office." "Aye, I'm on it." Steph hung up, leaving Alex alone with his thoughts in the outer tube. What the hell were the French playing at? None of this made sense. No one had legal authority to push anyone out of Armistice Station. Even Ledoux had to jump through several well-documented legal hoops to expel someone without clear misconduct committed. France's armed forces had zero authority here. He was missing something. But what? 21. Mistaken Identity. 13 April, 2038. John's eyes burned with fatigue. He tried to nap earlier and failed, catching only an hour or so before the sun went down. Sleeping on a submarine was never hard, no matter the time. John was out like the proverbial baby and could sleep through anything short of Armageddon or a phone call. Here on the carrier, however, John couldn't catch a wink when it was light out, or when the carrier conducted flight ops. Daylight and aircraft, 2 things that really make me feel at home. Who the hell wanted a bed where jet engines roared at odd hours anyway? This surface stuff was for the birds. Returning to the flag bridge didn't make him less tired, but at least being useful was an option. "COS, we just got a message from 7th Fleet. A Chinese helo buzzed Jeremiah Denton and Michael Monsur." The Battle Watch captain reported from her station to his right. "Monsur illuminated the helo and warned it off, but it shot a pair of C-802s. Denton shot the missiles down and they splashed the helo. No American casualties. Both ships are undamaged. Ford CSG is now in the East China Sea." God. John rubbed his eyes. Both Denton and Monsur were part of the Ford strike group. "Any change to ROE?" "No, sir. Rules of engagement remain unchanged. Weapons tight, warning yellow." "Aye," John grimaced. "Forward the message to the boss, please." He tuned out Lieutenant Andrea Rubino's call to Admiral McNally. McNally would be cranky. It was just past 4 in the morning local time, and chiefs of staff existed so admirals could sleep. But news of a China helo taking potshots at American warships couldn't wait for morning. Minutes ticked by like hours while John doodled the math on his console. Once the Ford and Enterprise strike groups joined up, plus the amphibious strike group under Admiral Rodriguez, they'd have 2 carriers, 3 cruisers, 9 destroyers, a helicopter carrier, and an amphib whose purpose John couldn't remember, and 3 attack submarines. The combined force was bigger than anything America fielded since the Cold War, but compared to China's order of battle, it was minuscule. Someone back in Washington thought their little show of power would deter the Chinese, but what if it wasn't enough? John swallowed. "Bella Wood reports a narrowband contact on her tail," Rubino said. John straightened so fast his back cracked. Submerged? Sounds like. Bearing either 125 or 305. They're requesting to maneuver to prosecute. John checked a sigh. He failed to convince McNally to swap Fletcher out for one of the other destroyers, but at least Enterprise dropped back to 2,000 yards behind Bellawood so that the cruiser could stream her own tail. Now, that effort bore fruit. Unfortunately, even the most advanced passive sonar arrays had difficulty determining what direction a sound came from. That was why submarines had multiple arrays, programmed to work in concert. Unfortunately, a surface ship just had their sonar dome, and usually, a towed array, which was just a string of hydrophones traveling underwater on a very long wire. At over 30 knots, the sonar dome's passive sonar was more useless than John expected. It couldn't filter out enough of the ship's own noise, which was why surface ship drivers liked streaming their tails. But the tail still got 2 bearings for every sound, the real bearing and its inverse, exactly 180 degrees out from the contact's location. The usual way to overcome that was maneuvering, which was just a bit difficult in a strait growing narrower by the mile. The Enterprise Strike Group entered the SOM's traffic separation scheme 5 minutes earlier. They were in the inbound traffic lane, and just like driving a car, you couldn't start swerving all over the place. "Tell them negative. We're in the VTSS," John ordered. "PWC-I," Rubino replied. John turned to his plot, looking at the lines of bearing Bellawood transmitted into Link. The strike group's course was 110, which meant the contact was either off their starboard bow or their port quarter. A sub astern isn't nearly as dangerous as one ahead. John fiddled with a grease pencil. Most subs in this part of the world were diesel-electric. Those boats were damnably quiet, but they weren't as fast as their nuclear counterparts. John wished using active sonar wasn't considered so rude by other navies. "You'd better call the admiral again," he told Rubino. John tuned the phone conversation out, instead donning a headset to listen into the command and control net. Most of the chatter was about navigation, something surface ships discussed endlessly. A few minutes passed. "Echo Bravo, this is Bellawood," the cruiser said. "Submerged contact matches tonals from a Kilo-class diesel submarine, over." "This is Echo Bravo. Roger, out." Rubino turned to John with wide eyes. "Relax," John said. 14 different countries are still operating Kilos. Russia sold them to anyone with money back in the day." "You mean like the Germans do today?" Rubino laughed, but her eyes were a touch too wide. "Yep, the French too. But Kilos are older and louder. Even a surface ship can track them." John grinned. Rubino shook her head. "You sub guys are all the same, aren't you?" "Well, you skimmers certainly seem to think so." John might have said more if not for Admiral McNally's arrival on the flag bridge. Instead, he rose and briefed his boss on the situation. "Sir, Bellawood has a passive contact, probable Kilo class." McNally frowned. "Who around here still has Kilos?" "India, Myanmar, Vietnam, and Indonesia," John replied. "India's got 4 left. The rest are all decommissioned or sold to other navies." Today, most of the Indian Navy's submarines were French-built Scorpions. Some were diesel-electric, and the later models were AIP, or air-independent propulsion. All were quieter than Kilos bought from Russia in the early 1990s. Those boats were antiques. Were they even seaworthy? Even an antique could shoot a modern torpedo. "China has them too," McNally said. "Send one of the helos to investigate." John felt his heart skip a beat. "You think they'd send a boat all the way? More likely than an Indian one creeping around out here. Theirs are ancient death traps." McNally shook his head. "Send the helo." "Aye, sir." John nodded to Rubino, who frowned. "Admiral, sending a helo violates transit passage. They have to continue in one direction." "And we're 5 inches for more with China. Send the damned helo," McNally snapped. "If someone complains, it's on my head." A few moments later, Bella Wood's helicopter, call sign Striker 964, turned to investigate. John cleared his throat. "Sir, do you want to launch the ASW alert helo?" he asked. "Bella Wood's helos are configured for SUW. They don't have dipping sonar." McNally nodded. "Do it." "Fletcher, this is Echo Bravo," Rubino said over the command circuit. "Report time to launch ASW helo, over." "Echo Bravo, Fletcher, 30 mics." Nancy Coleman's irritation came clearly over the radio, and no wonder, since she voiced concerns on this same topic days ago. "Rolling helo out of the hangar and 5, over." "Echo Bravo, roger, out." John returned to his seat and watched the icon representing Striker 964 zoom forward of the formation, buzzing past Fletcher to look for an enemy submarine. It was probably nothing. The sonar contact might even be a whale. Stranger things happened. "Echo Bravo, this is Bella Wood. Striker 964 reports periscope gone sinker, over." "Shit!" McNally threw himself into his command chair. "Bella Wood, this is Echo Bravo actual. Have Striker 964 remain on station. Break. Fletcher, go active, over." Both ships acknowledged the commands. John's heart crept up into his throat and made a nest there. Nothing was more dangerous than a sub you knew was there but couldn't see. Most subs came to periscope depth before shooting. Only idiots wanted to torpedo the wrong ship. But were they a target, or was the Kilo just snorkeling? Or maybe just trying to get away from pesky American ships? "Echo Bravo, this is Bella Wood. New contact track 4015. Probable Kilo-class submarine bearing 137 from Enterprise at 9,000 yards," the cruiser reported. It sounded like Captain Rosario. "Sending Striker 964 FLIR video to Enterprise, over." "Send the strike group to battle stations," McNally ordered as video flickered up on the port view screen. It was black and white from the helicopter's forward-looking infrared camera and showed a dark shadow right underneath the surface. "And someone wake up Captain Edwards and get aircraft in the air." Staff members scurried to do his bidding. Within a minute, Enterprise's general alarm began donging. A voice from the bridge rang out over the 1MC. General quarters, all hands man your battle stations. Set material conditions zebra throughout the ship. General quarters." The words repeated, and then the alarm donged again. John turned to his admiral. "Sir, we might want to hold off on launching aircraft. I think the winds are—" McNally held up a hand, and John sighed. Enterprise needed wind over her deck to launch. Speed through the water created some wind, except the weather today meant the wind came from the south. To launch aircraft, Enterprise would have to either sprint ahead and leave her escorts behind, or turn around. 2 options, bad and worse. 28 minutes until Fletcher could launch an anti-submarine warfare configured helicopter. They'd have to roll the bird out of the hangar, unfold the wings, and fuel it. 28 minutes was a lifetime against a submarine. Enterprise didn't even have sonar, so she relied upon Bella Wood's sensors to hold the track. "Sir, I recommend coming left to open the range to the submarine," Rubino said. "And present our broadsides to a Chinese torpedo?" McNally reared back as if slapped. "Do I look crazy?" Everyone on the flag bridge stared. John scratched his ear. "Sir, we don't know the Kilo is Chinese," he said. "Shut up, John!" McNally's eyes never left the screen, but John still flinched. McNally wasn't stupid, but there was little color in the Admiral's face, and his knuckles were white where they gripped the cord between his headset and the console. Minutes crept by. "Echo Bravo, this is Fletcher," Nancy's voice blared out of the command circuit. "My SSES reports chatter on military frequencies. Break. Active sonar bearing 159er. I say again, Fletcher has been pinged by active sonar. Identified as Shark Gill, over." Shark Gill was the NATO name for the Rubicon MGK 400 sonar system, which was only on the original built Kilo submarines. The later ones had different sonar systems. John knew submarine capabilities and limitations better than he knew the stats for his favorite baseball team. "How many of China's kilos are the first build?" McNally demanded. "2, sir," John replied before anyone else could. "India's are all—" "Bellawood, Echo Bravo Actual. Kill tracked 2015 with ASRock, over," McNally ordered. John froze. "Admiral, India's kilos all have that radar too. We can't shoot without knowing whose boat this is. India wouldn't ping a destroyer with active sonar unless they intended to shoot, and I am damned well not going to be the first American admiral to lose a ship in combat since World War II. McNally's face was bright red, and his words a bellow as he turned back to the command circuit. "Bellawood, Echo Bravo Actual, did you copy my last?" "Bellawood, roger. Spinning up Bassett." Captain Rosario's voice was clipped and tight. "You don't want to be the first person to fire, either." John leaned forward to whisper. How long did an ASRock need to fire? John's usual experience came on the receiving end, not the launching one. RUM-139 anti-submarine rocket launch torpedoes were an American surface ship's quickest way to kill a submarine at long range. Launched by a missile out of a cruiser or destroyer's vertical launch system, the torpedo was delivered by parachutes into the water, at which point its onboard engines kicked on, and it homed in on the submarine. John knew how to dodge them, but not how long a cruiser needed to fire one. "Your objection is noted, Captain," McNally glared. John met his eyes, praying the admiral would realize what he was about to do. Every officer in the U.S. Navy always knew they wouldn't take the first shot in a war. They'd get shot at, take their lumps, and then turn the aggressor into a parking lot. That tradition went back to World War I. "Echo Bravo, Bellawood, Bassett away, track 4015. It was too late. Alex got lucky. The outer tube dropped him off near the end of Bass, only 20 feet away from the Fisher tube. There to the Hilton was a quick 2-minute walk. Thankfully, there were no Marines out front. Fisher was quiet, save for a group of teens playing with their phones down near Gray's dive shop. Pushing the doors open, Alex went for the stairs instead of the elevator, taking them 2 at a time until he reached the 3rd floor. Room 318 was Admiral Hamilton's. Steeling himself, Alex rapped on the door with his knuckles. He counted to 5 and then knocked again. An eternity seemed to pass before Freddie Hamilton threw the door open, her hair askew and wearing an old Naval Academy t-shirt. "Commander Coleman, I hope this is good." Damn. He'd hoped for Maria Vasquez. Alex swallowed. "Ma'am, can I come in? It's important." Hamilton glowered, but stepped aside to let him pass. Maria was awake too, sitting up in bed and blinking sleepily. Fuck, what if this is nothing? French Marines don't round up Americans for nothing, jackass. Alex waited for the door to shut before clearing his throat. "I just passed a bunch of French Marines hauling American, British, and Australian civilians out of the Armistice Excelsior. They were told they'd be transported off the station immediately." "Say again?" Hamilton stared at him like he'd grown 2 heads. Maybe he had. The Marines cited some sort of international agreement, but unless the world's changed one hell of a lot while we've been out of comms, that sounds like bullshit to me, Alex replied. "I don't know what the hell's going on, but we need to get you and Secretary Fowler away from a hotel until we find more out." He wished Amelia Earhart was still at the station, but they departed 2 days earlier. Hell, if Earhart hadn't left, communicating with the outside world would be easy. "Where to, Commander?" Hamilton matched actions to words, throwing on clothes while Alex hurriedly turned his back. Maria did the same. Both women were submariners too, and modesty took a back seat when trouble started. "I've got a bridge-to-bridge radio in the office, and the rest of my folks will meet us there. Commander Gomez should be waking up the secretary right now," Alex replied. "Once we're there, we can go topside and try to raise Earhart." Hamilton nodded. "She might not be in radio range, but it's worth a try. Let's do it." Alex's phone rang. "Coleman." "Sir, it's Steph. Secretary Fowler and Mr. Gage want to know what the hell is going on." There were voices in the background, mostly Fowler, who whined more than Alex's teenage daughters. "Tell him we're on the way to the office and I'll explain there." "Aye, sir." Steph hung up, cutting off whatever complaint Fowler started to voice. Hamilton bared her teeth in a humorless smile. "He's a dick, isn't he?" Alex surprised himself by laughing. "Ma'am, I don't think I've got a high enough pay grade to criticize politicians." "Mine isn't either," she replied, hefting a bag. "Let's go." Parachutes flared, and a Mark 54 lightweight hybrid torpedo dropped into the water. Despite his misgivings, John watched the helicopter FLIR video in fascination. How many times had he wondered what an ASROC-launched torpedo looked like going into the water? Now he knew. The torpedo's engine kicked on, sending it after the Kilo at over 40 knots. Compared to a nuclear submarine's top speed, 40 knots was nothing, but a diesel like the Kilo couldn't make much past 20, less on battery. The torpedo didn't have far to go either. It landed barely 800 yards short of the Kilo. The Kilo traveled 200 yards in the time it took the Mark 54's motor to start, but once the torpedo started pinging, it was over. A 40-knot torpedo could cover those 1,000 yards in less than a minute. "All units, this is Bella Wood. Torpedo in the water. Enemy torpedo in the water bearing 155. 10 terror-filled seconds passed before Enterprise heeled hard left, the great carrier vibrating as her helmsman slammed the throttles to flank speed. Capable of almost 50 knots, Enterprise still couldn't outrun the Chinese U-6 torpedo, which ran at 65 plus. Worse yet, the U-6, like the American torpedo it was based on, was wake-homing. It would run up a ship's wake until it exploded under their stern. The torpedo's high-explosive sodium hydride warhead was built to crack submarine hulls. A warship's keel would last about 0.2 seconds. But what ship was it aimed at? John's chest felt tight. McNally was pale and sweating, staring at the console like he couldn't see it. They were passengers now. It was up to Captain Edwards and the other COs to execute their torpedo evasion maneuvers. John could see the carrier's escorts doing just that on the plot. The formation wheeled left, ships snaking through the water and dropping noisemakers to confuse the wake-homing torpedo. A flare on the video screen made John turn just in time to see an underwater explosion, centered on the FLIR video. The water jumped up as if a giant balloon was under the surface, cascading back down to form a convex hole of suction until the waves returned to normal. "Echo Bravo, Bella Wood. Striker 964 reports good hit." It wasn't Captain Rosario this time. She was busy fighting to keep her cruiser alive. No one answered until John keyed his microphone. "This is Echo Bravo, Roger, out." John swallowed. They'd fired the first shot. Now it was time to see who paid for it. "Echo Bravo, Fletcher, torpedo speed and tonals match a Test 83 torpedo," Nancy Coleman reported. "What?" John didn't realize the question was his until heads turned. Everyone except McNally stared at him blankly. "The Test 83 is a French and Indian design. Did we just sink an Indian Kilo?" No one answered. "Fuck!" John didn't swear often. This was worth it. He didn't doubt Nancy. Not Nancy, who memorized adversary capabilities and limitations for fun. "Echo Bravo, Kid. My SSES reports multiple Indian radars on the horizon," the aft destroyer reported just as the formation turned right again, still locked in torpedo evasion maneuvers. There wasn't much room to run in the strait. The Somme was less than 90 nautical miles wide here, and the traffic separation scheme's lanes averaged about 2 miles wide. "Admiral, I recommend continuing right and leaving the lane," John said, leaving the Battle Watch captain to acknowledge Kidd's report. We have no room to maneuver here, but if we turn before Rupat Island, there's good water to the west. McNally nodded choppily. Okay, he whispered. Was that sub Indian? I think so, sir. John waited for McNally to give the order, but his white-faced boss went silent again. John keyed his own microphone. All ships, this is Echo Bravo. New formation base course 225. Every ship sounded relieved to acknowledge that order. Room to maneuver meant room to avoid the torpedo. A Test 83 had about 14 minutes of gas at its top speed. John looked at the clock. How had it only been 3 minutes since the Kilo fired? Bellawood lagged behind Enterprise as they came around to the new formation course. Their once straight formation was ragged, with Fletcher out on Enterprise's starboard bow instead of directly ahead of her. Astern, John Finn was slightly off Bellawood's port quarter, with Kidd astern of her. John would have to sort the formation out soon, but there was no use trying until the torpedo ran out of gas. 22. The Storm Cometh. This is ridiculous. Fowler slammed his butt into a chair as soon as everyone reached the office, and Alex brought his team up to speed. Both security guys stood just inside the entrance, their body language tense and eyes scanning the tube outside for threats. You're overreacting. Maybe, Alex replied. But what if I'm not? We saw the same thing happening down at the Cameron. Bradshaw leaned against the wall, trying to look casual despite his drawn features. A shit ton of French Marines and a bunch of civilians who are Americans or our bestest friends. Olsen looked up from her phone. My friend at the Hilton says they're there now. What? Fowler's mouth hung open. But... This is clearly a pattern, Alex cut in. What we need to know is why. Olsen, does your friend have any idea why the French are pulling people out? And where's he from, anyway? The last thing he needed was for Olsen to be distracted because her boyfriend was a hostage or exile or whatever. Madagascar. No one pays attention to him. Olsen quirked a smile. He says they're just using that same international agreement line. Which is horseshit. Admiral Hamilton's voice was stern. You said something about a bridge-to-bridge radio, Commander? Yes, ma'am. No one was in uniform, but Alex wasn't stupid enough to disrespect an admiral, particularly this one. But it won't work from down here. I didn't expect it would. Her glare was withering. All right, the only question is if we all go topside or if some people stay here. Do you think they'll come looking in your office? Alex shrugged. I'm not the most popular person here, so if Ledoux suddenly has a hard-on for hating Americans, she won't forget us. What did you do to make her dislike you? Hamilton asked. Someone told her I was Kansas's XO. Alex managed a cold smile, meeting Hamilton's eyes. She knew Kansas hadn't shot a single damned torpedo. They both knew that was his fault. But the world blamed Kansas, and Ledoux's closest target was Alex. Hamilton pursed her lips, and then finally looked away. Was that a victory? Sure didn't feel like one. Platform 3's elevator bank is just around the corner, Steph volunteered. I can jet up there with Bradshaw and try to reach Earhart. If they answer, I'll call your cell. Sounds like a plan, Alex nodded, holding his breath to see if Hamilton would object. Bradshaw got in first, starting off the wall, eyes wide. Why me? Because everyone owes you money. Steph's grin was all teeth. That's got to be useful for more than making you rich. I'm not rich, Bradshaw muttered, but he didn't object when Steph grabbed him by one shoulder and the bridge-to-bridge radio in the other hand. The two ducked out of the office as Jesse spoke up. I can go take a look around and see what's happening. I know pretty much every wholesaler around here, and if they don't owe Bradshaw money, they like me. Alex blinked. Jesse wasn't the type to volunteer for much. He was good at following orders, but not exactly high on what Alex would call initiative. I'll go with him, Maria Vasquez said from Hamilton's right. The admiral's head snapped around, and Maria shrugged. Unless there's someone else who can speak a language well enough to pretend they're from another country, I think I'm the logical choice. My grandparents were from Colombia. Hamilton frowned. Be careful. This kind of thing really isn't our game. Careful's not a problem, ma'am. Vasquez's grin was brief. I want to get the hell out of here. Fine. Hamilton's nod was more of a glower, but she didn't argue. Fowler continued his rant-like conversation with his aide and ignored everyone else, going on about how this couldn't be happening and it was all some giant mistake. Maria and Jessie left too, leaving Alex to manage an admiral, a politician, and a politician's bored-looking aide. I hate this job. Mon capitaine? Camille touched Jules' shoulder before he even realized she was in Central. Not reacting was hard, but Jules Rochambeau was the face of French military might, so he remained relaxed in his chair at the center of Central, eyes alert but calm. Oui? He tried to keep annoyance out of his voice. The Marines had gathered almost half the American, British, and Australian tourists. They left the Canadians alone because half of them were French speakers, and Canadians never meddled in this corner of the world anyway. The plan was proceeding nicely. Admiral Bernard just sent word. The Enterprise strike group just sank an Indian Kilo-class submarine in the Strait of Malacca. What? Jules hated jumping like a fool. Has Admiral Carre said anything? I sent his aide to wake him so he can confirm with his government. Jules blinked. How could such a thing happen? He had been so careful to prevent bloodshed. France's best interests lay in America retreating with her honor bruised but not bloodied. The ULP would be reasonable, removing American influence without violence. The war with China would consume America's resources anyway. There was no need to start a second confrontation. French politicians spent liberal diplomatic capital convincing India of that after the fracas at Diego Garcia. And now this? Because they are uncultured swine who believe brute force can solve anything, Admiral Carre growled in English, striding into the room with his uniform blouse still unbuttoned. His hair was rumpled, but Carre's eyes blazed. This changes everything. I take it your reluctance concerning our objectives is no more, Admiral? Jules asked in the same language, smiling as he rose. Do not jest, Captain. More than 50 of my Navy sailors are dead because of American arrogance. My condolences. Jules bowed his head, meaning it. They are my brother and sister submariners. May they rest easy on eternal patrol. His imagination was sufficient to conjure up what those last moments would be like. Water rushing in before the sudden implosion, and then utter blackness. Jules sometimes dreamt of meeting his end that way, and once of the civilians on the Nake he consigned to that same fate. I may send many others to the bottom before this is done. There was not time for regrets. Camille quietly echoed his sentiments before turning to him. Your orders, mon capitaine. Return to Barracuda. Brief the crew. Stand by for anything. Jules' mind whirled as he looked at Carre. We must assume the Americans will fight back if we cannot present them with a fait accompli, no? Undoubtedly. Carre bared his teeth. But you need not worry about the Enterprise strike group. INS Vichal and her escorts are closing with them now. Jules' breath caught. Vichal was an aircraft carrier, although not a supercarrier like Enterprise. Still, if the Indians meant to make a fight of it, so much for the peaceful solution. Then we shall do our part. He lifted his radio. Commandant Moreau, accelerate your removal of our unwanted guests. Feel free to use the threat of deadly force, but do not harm civilians. Oui, mon capitaine, Moreau replied, spinning on her heel and heading out. Ada Ledoux, silent until now, stepped forward. This was not part of our agreement. Madame Ledoux, we must free your station of undesirables quickly, or we will not get the chance to do so. Me? No. We are committed, madame. American civilians and their allies will crumble at the threat of force. Jules' own orders were clear. Once the operation started, France could not afford to stop. No more would his nation bear the reputation of a country of cowards. France would not run. France would win. Steph and Bradshaw made it into the elevator before French Marines got near their part of the station. Steph didn't know what to make of this, didn't know what to think, but she had a job to do, and she was damned well going to do it. She'd trained for something like this, or almost close enough, so the idea of armed enemies surrounding her wasn't going to make her cry in a corner. The problem was that in training, she knew what the enemy wanted, and if they were the enemy at all. This is fucking insane, Bradshaw muttered after the elevator doors dinged shut. You can say that again. Steph wiped her sweaty palms on her jeans. She hadn't changed into uniform when Alex called, and now she was glad. There weren't a lot of people out on the transplant at this hour. 1 in the morning wasn't exactly prime loading or unloading time, even for cruise ships. But wearing a Navy uniform was a fantastic way to get spotted. And then what would happen? Steph wasn't going to test that theory today. The elevator doors opened and Bradshaw hesitated. What's the plan anyway, Ops? We just shout into the void and hope Earhart listens? Pretty much. Steph looked both ways and then walked out of the elevator, into the humid night air, trying to pretend she belonged. The salty sea smell was a welcome change over Armistice Station's canned atmosphere, which always smelled a little metallic. Come on. Muttering obscenities, Bradshaw followed. Never again volunteer yourself. I should have fucking listened to that. I saw your re-enlistment request. Steph grinned as they headed out to the platform proper. You can quit faking. I like my job, Bradshaw scowled. This ain't my fucking job. Yeah, mine neither. Steph was trained to drive and fight ships. Sometimes surface officers ended up doing odd jobs, like anti-terrorism, which she'd trained in on her first ship. But stuff like this wasn't her core competency. Swallowing, Steph pushed those thoughts aside. Passing a group of drunk Panamanian sailors, Steph stopped next to a towering silver and green yacht. The damn thing was gorgeous, with sleek lines and water jet propulsion that made Steph burn to take her for a spin. We don't get toys like that in the Navy. They were in Earhart's old berth, across from the French frigate. The frigate looked like any warship in the middle of the night, with a few watchstanders peppered around topside, but otherwise quiet. There was a Norwegian cruise line ship astern of her, sending lines to the pier. It was an odd hour for a cruise ship to tie up, wasn't it? She lifted the bridge-to-bridge radio. U.S. Navy Oiler 6, U.S. Navy Oiler 6, this is Naval Detachment Armistice Station, calling you on Channel 16, over. At least the International Maritime Hailing Channel was quiet this time of night. Too quiet. Earhart didn't answer. Steph swore under her breath. She wished her phone would work, that she wasn't stuck using Armistice Station's proprietary network, that the bastards could just turn the fuck off. Why hadn't the Navy issued their detachment an Iridium satellite phone? Then they could just call Earhart's external phone line. U.S. Navy Oiler 6, U.S. Navy Oiler 6, this is Naval Detachment Armistice Station, calling you on Channel 16, over, she repeated. Seconds passed, then static. Finally, a voice replied, Naval Detachment Armistice Station, this is Oiler 6, roger, over. Steph sagged in relief. Great to hear from you, Oiler 6. We need an immediate evac for some VIPs. How soon can you be here, over? There was a long pause. Bradshaw muttered. Steph knew Earhart couldn't be far. Bridge-to-bridge radio was VHF, which had a maximum range of around 60 miles on a really good day. Finally, the radio crackled. My max speed available is 20 knots. I need 67 minutes to reach your position, over. Roger, break. Please make best speed, over, Steph said in her best professional voice. Why was she so nervous? She talked on bridge-to-bridge radios all the time as a surface warfare officer. But it wasn't the radio making ants crawl up her spine. There was something else. Navy Oiler 6, roger, out. Steph lowered the radio, glancing at the yacht again. Seas were calm, which would make a small boat transfer easier, and they'd have to use a boat. No way would Armistice Station allow Earhart to come alongside, even if they had pier space. Or maybe they would. They wanted Americans to leave. You know, we could just hop on whatever boat the locals want us to get on, Bradshaw said. Wouldn't that be easier than all this skulking around? Did you really just use the word skulking unironically? Bradshaw glowered. No fair playing grammar police, ma'am. Just answer the question. Can you imagine the optics of the U.S. Navy just going where French Marines told us to? They're not our enemies. Not yet. Steph snuck a look back at Bretagne. The frigate remained the perfect picture of a sleepy warship. Would we be that sleepy if U.S. Marines were running around a station rounding people up? Her skin crawled. Come on, Ops, you can't believe that. Bradshaw rolled his eyes. It's the 21st century, and the French have been our friends since... Holy shit, there are a bunch of Marines headed this way. They've got a group of civvies with them, too. Looks like a couple hundred. Those rifles they're holding are really friendly, huh? Steph's smile felt poisonous. She tried not to stare at the confused people following the group of Marines. Staring got people noticed. Ignoring things was hard when a French Marine shoved a civilian for walking too slow, though. Bradshaw grabbed her arm. Oh, shut up and let's walk casual-like to the fucking elevator, ma'am. You speak any Spanish? She asked as they headed down the platform towards the elevator bank. Huh? I know a couple swear words, I guess. They probably don't either. Try to stick to C or no, okay? Steph shoved her hands in her pockets and started babbling in her parents' native language. She bet the French couldn't tell the difference between her Mexican Spanish and Castilian Spanish, and even if they could, no one said anything about kicking Mexicans off the station. Bradshaw managed to look like a surly know-it-all even without understanding a word Steph said. He nodded along or argued, depending on her tone. That got them past the Marines and into the elevator. One Marine looked at them curiously, but a complaining civilian distracted her, and she didn't follow the pair. For the record, I never want to do that again. Bradshaw slumped against the back wall of the elevator the moment the doors closed. Copy that. Steph almost answered in Spanish. You gonna tell me what you said, or am I just gonna piss myself instead? He asked. A long essay on you're the worst cook in creation and your culinary arts stink of elderberry? What? Really? It's the best thing I could think of on short notice, okay? Steph refused to let herself relax. Not until they were on Earhart and outbound from Armistice Station. Nancy almost ran to the bridge when the Kilo fired torpedoes, but now she was glad she hadn't. Modern battles had to be fought in the Combat Information Center. The bridge maneuvered the ship, but CIC detected and countered threats. The evals she worked on earlier were somewhere on the floor. Nancy alternated between monitoring the tactical plot and watching Striker 964's FLIR video. The forward helicopter now ranged 30 miles out from the formation, trying to find the source of the Indian targeting radars. Nancy wished Ying could be down here so she had someone to rant to. Was McNally mad? He fired on another nation's submarine in peacetime, and it turned out to belong to a different nation than expected. Yeah, the Indians shot at U.S. destroyers near Diego Garcia, but only 18 sailors died that day. Only. One torpedo just killed almost 3 times that many. With China shooting at them today, why borrow trouble with India? The FLIR video jumped and then went blank. Aztec, TAO, check the link connection with the helo, will you? Lieutenant Commander Attar said over the net. Holy shit! Vampire, vampire, vampire! Fletcher's air warfare coordinator's shout was loud enough that Nancy could hear it without her headset. Multiple missiles launched bearing 096, range 110 nautical miles. Nancy wheeled back to the plot, watching the angry upside-down V icons of hostile missiles blossom on the screen. She smashed the foot pedal down on her microphone for the tactical net. All ships, Fletcher. Vampire, Vampire, Vampire. Inbound anti-ship missiles bearing 096. She swapped to her ship's internal net. Bridge, Captain, all back full. Every destroyer captain knew their primary mission was to protect the carrier. To do that, Fletcher needed to be between Enterprise and the firing ships, and the best way to do that was slam on the brakes. The formation's ragged maneuvering meant Fletcher was the only ship that could get there in time. Nancy just hoped it wouldn't make her destroyer eat the torpedo still out there somewhere. Nancy's left hand snaked down on its own, finding the firing interdict switch, or FIS key. The FIS was a warship's last safety. Once it turned to green, any computer-controlled weapon on the ship could be fired with the push of a button. FIS is green. TAO, you have batteries release. Activate doctrine and defend the carrier. 23. Furball. Comms are being jammed, someone shouted right after Fletcher's vampire call rocketed across the command circuit. John paid it little mind. His eyes were on McNally, who was dangerously pale. All McNally did was lick his lips, his eyes wide and glazed over. Admiral, John whispered. No answer. Sir? McNally finally turned to look at him. His hands shook. What have I done? There's no time for that. John's heart raced, his eyes flicking back to the flag plot. There were too many missiles headed their way. Enterprise's combat systems struggled to count them all. The command circuit was silent as the jamming cut off their communications right when they needed them most. And McNally didn't know what to do. The Admiral's mouth was open. No words emerged. Change to alternate frequencies, John ordered. Holy hell. What were those missiles? And why the hell had Striker 964 vanished? Racking his brain revealed one answer. The Indians owned the fastest reliable anti-ship cruise missile in the world. The BrahMos NG missile traveled at Mach 7, over 4,500 knots. At this range, they had barely a minute. What was Fletcher doing? Enterprise's forward camera caught the destroyer backing down hard, water boiling at her stern. My God, John whispered as Nancy Coleman threw Fletcher between Enterprise and the incoming missiles. Light flared in the night. SM-6 Block 1B standard missiles burst out of Fletcher's vertical launch system, racing towards the incoming firestorm. Bellawood, birds away! The alternate command circuit took over in his headset, just in time for John to hear the cruiser announce her missile launch. Thank God Captain Rosario created air defense sectors as soon as the strike group got underway. No one expected to need them, but Navy tradition revolved around training. Now, that practice meant that the 3 destroyers and the cruiser used slightly overlapping fields of fire, so their standard missiles didn't commit fratricide or go after the same targets. Meanwhile, Enterprise steamed quietly at the middle of the fray, slowing down to stop outrunning her escorts. The carrier was armed with short-range ESSM and shorter-ranged point-defense RAM missiles. She wouldn't fire unless leakers made it through the shooter's defenses. More light flashed on the video screen. Fletcher's second launch roared into the night. Bellawood and the other destroyers' launches came a split second later, but all John and his fellows on Enterprise could do was watch. Commander Tyler Marshall of USS John Finn, DDG-113, was on the bridge when the Indians launched on the Enterprise strike group. The bridge was dark, illuminated only by radar and navigation screens covered by red plastic. Marshall sat quietly in the captain's chair in the forward starboard corner, staring into the night and wondering if another submarine would appear. He heard the report of inbound missiles, but it didn't register for a few crucial seconds. The Indians were too far away from Marshall to see the missiles. That would change all too quickly, and he wanted to think this was all a mistake. "TAO, Captain, say again," he said over John Finn's internal tactical circuit. "Incoming missiles, bearing 103, the TAO replied. "Multiple incoming missiles bearing 103. There was a tactical repeater above the captain's chair on Finn's bridge, so Marshall saw the V-shaped symbols representing hostile missiles appear over 100 miles away. There were too many to count. Too many to... "Captain, TAO, do I have batteries release?" The words echoed in his ears as Marshall stared at the display, willing the missiles away. This wasn't supposed to happen. The U.S. Navy never faced a modern Navy in combat. The U.S. Navy was the best in the world, unchallenged and supreme. No one dared fire on them. The Indians had to be insane. "TAO, air, all incoming missiles are BrahMos NG anti-ship missiles," his air warfare coordinator reported. Dear God. The BrahMos traveled at Mach 7. His hands were numb. Marshall's destroyer had 96 cells in her vertical launch system. 32 of those held Tomahawk land attack missiles, useless against a surface or air threat. Another 5 held RIM 162 evolved Sea Sparrow missiles, with 4 ESSM per cell, which were fast enough to catch a BrahMos, and 10 held SM-6 Block 1B missiles, the best anti-air missile in the American inventory. But the rest held SM-2 Block 4 missiles. The SM-2 was the bedrock of American air defense since the 1980s, incrementally improved until the introduction of the SM-6 in 2009. The SM-6 was faster, longer-ranged, and had a larger warhead, but the Navy's inventory still held a lot of SM-2s. As a result, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers like John Finn usually deployed with a mix of SM-2s and SM-6s. Bad luck gave Finn more of the former. The SM-2 traveled at Mach 3.5, half the speed of the Indians' BrahMos. It couldn't match the speed of a BrahMos tactical maneuvers, no matter what Finn did. And that storm of missiles contained a hell of a lot more than 10 BrahMos missiles targeted at Finn. Marshall never felt so cold in his life. His hands gripped his chair's armrests with white knuckles until the officer of the deck shook his shoulder. "Captain, we need you," Lieutenant Aspen said. Marshall blinked. "Right." He keyed the microphone for the tactical net. His mouth felt dry. "TAO, Captain, batteries release." "TAO, aye. Air, TAO, kill tracks in our sector." "Air, aye. Killing with birds, selecting SM-6 preference." It wouldn't be enough. Marshall knew that. He knew he should race to CIC, but he'd never make it before the missiles hit. He would have to trust his tactical action officer to fight the ship. Would have to hope against hope that Finn's outdated missiles would somehow do the job. VLS cells opened, missiles launched from Finn's VLS banks, their boosters burning brightly against the night sky. Marshall couldn't count how many, but there were more than 10. And his hesitation cost John Finn. While Fletcher, Bella Wood, and Kidd got off 3 launches, 2 standard missiles, 1 ESSM, John Finn only managed 1. That launch contained all 10 SM-6s and 20 SM-2s. Standard Navy tactics demanded at least 2 missiles be allocated to each incoming missile, and Finn's Aegis combat system detected 19 missiles headed for her assigned sector. Unfortunately, Finn's watchstanders neglected to activate Doctrine, which allowed Aegis to defend the ship autonomously. Instead, human reflexes fought to overcome the incoming storm, and humans just weren't fast enough. Fireworks filled the night sky as American missiles raced out to meet Indian. Finn was aft of Bella Wood and Enterprise, A corner of Marshall's mind noted how Fletcher dropped back to be between the carrier and the threat bearing. Bella Wood, just 1,500 yards ahead, launched dozens more missiles than Finn managed. The cruiser had 144 launch cells, and Captain Rosario somehow put 40 missiles in the air to engage the threat. It was almost enough to cover Finn. Like Nancy Coleman on Fletcher, Rosario activated her ship's doctrine, the computer-controlled self-defense plan sailors jokingly called Armageddon Mode. The link connection between the cruiser and John Finn told Bella Wood's combat system that Finn couldn't launch enough missiles, but Bella Wood was too far back to engage missiles aimed directly towards Finn. She only had seconds to hit those missiles with crossing shots. Seconds were not enough. "Brace for impact," Marshall ordered at the last moment. He clung to his chair as Finn's missiles did their damnedest to kill their faster enemies. 9 of the 10 SM-6s killed Abramos. The last wasted itself on a target one of its sisters already destroyed. A surprising 4 SM-2s managed the same, but that left 6 missiles out of the 19 in her assigned sector. Bella Wood got 2. The remainder targeted Finn. 1 lost lock and slammed into the ocean 100 yards shy of her port side. 2 were sucked away by her TAO's last-ditch launch of Nulka, a tactical decoy designed to distract missiles. The last 2 dodged bullets from her Sea Whiz, close-in weapon system, and slammed into Finn's port side, exploding right where the line usually formed on the mess decks. The destroyer rocked right, shuddering from bow to stern. Her lights flickered once, twice, and then died. The impact threw Marshall out of his chair and into the bridge windshield, where his head broke the double-paned glass, leaving a spear of blood over a foot long. Lieutenant Aspen slammed into the helm console, taking both helmswomen down with him in a heap. One broke her ankle and screamed. Other sailors fell like dominoes, some catching themselves, others never rising again. Below decks, the twin blasts carved a 20-foot hole in Finn's port side, destroying everything in their path. The first missile broke through the hole into main engine room number 2, its shockwave ripping one main engine off its mounts and throwing fragments and debris into the main reduction gear. Number 2 gas turbine generator tripped offline, and piping burst, causing a major fuel oil leak. 2 watchstanders were killed immediately. The third made it to an escape trunk before the resulting fire caught her. Radio, the engineering central control station, and 6 other spaces were left open to the sea. Electrical power failed, and with it, any pumps capable of combating the flooding. Watchstanders evacuated, rushing up ladders as Finn listed to port. Other sailors raced to combat the damage, not knowing how big the hole was or where the danger lay. Some fell into chasms and never returned. Others groped for firefighting equipment in the darkness. Then, one of the 2 missiles sucked away by Finn's Nulka decoys found a new target. Enterprise. "Birds away," Fletcher's air warfare coordinator announced as Fletcher surged forward again. The destroyer steamed less than 600 yards off Enterprise's starboard beam, right between her and the Indians. "All stations, this is Striker 961, the second helicopter in the air reported over the command circuit. Nancy listened with half an ear, her eyes riveted on the missiles raining down on her ship. "I have visual on Striker 964's debris and a long-range look at the enemy. Looks like 1 carrier and at least 6 destroyers, over." "Bella Wood, roger. Break, are they launching aircraft, over?" "Affirmative. They look like MiGs, over." Leaker, track 7089, doctrine engaging," the combat systems officer of the watch said, and Nancy felt her destroyer shudder again. Another 3 SM-6s launched from Fletcher's forward VLS bank, and Nancy held her breath. The BrahMos NG missile, called PJ-10 by NATO, was a ramjet supersonic anti-ship cruise missile. Based on a Russian design, the second-generation BrahMos missiles had a range of over 120 nautical miles and topped Mach 7. Its 440-pound conventional armor-piercing warhead was enough to rip a destroyer's thin skin open or punch irreparable holes in an aircraft carrier. The days of World War II gun battles where ships hammered one another for hours with heavy shells were over. Modern ships couldn't take a lot of damage, not in missile combat. Their survival lay in air defense. Fletcher shuddered again as her third launch of missiles erupted from her VLS cells. These were ESSM, or Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles. Many NATO ships used ESSM as surface-to-surface missiles, but the United States used them for point defense. Nancy held her breath. An ESSM launch meant Fletcher's Aegis weapon system was on its own, using pre-programmed routines to shoot down missiles too fast for humans to track. The distinctive burp of Fletcher's Sea Whiz guns came next. The Phalanx close-in weapon system was the marriage of a phased array radar and an M61 20mm Vulcan Gatling gun. Capable of firing up to 4,500 rounds per minute in full auto, Fletcher's Sea Whiz was programmed to fire in bursts of 100 rounds, each of which shot out at approximately 3,600 feet per second. Nancy's sailors liked to call it the Sea Whiz fart every time the system fired in exercises. But this was not training. Nancy braced herself. If Sea Whiz missed, Fletcher would be ripped apart. The inevitable explosion never came. "Tracks killed with Sea Whiz," Lieutenant Commander David Attar reported, his shoulders slumping in relief. "Very well." Appearing the unaffected and professional captain was impossible with her heart hammering so loudly. Nancy licked her lips, and then dared look at the rest of the strike group. Enterprise matched Fletcher's course and speed, still off Fletcher's port side. Bella Wood was right behind her, with Kidd and John Finn astern. But John Finn was dropping back, her speed decreasing rapidly. "Train the OSS to John Finn," Nancy ordered, punching in the code to place the view from the optical sight system onto the large-screen display. "Sweet Jesus," Attar whispered. John Finn listed heavily to port, on fire, with black smoke billowing out of her superstructure. A gaping hole marred her port side, and she seemed locked into a starboard turn that brought her perilously close to Kidd. Muzzle flashes lit up the night sky. The OSS operator swung the system to follow them as Enterprise's Sea Whiz burped, tracer rounds arcing out to meet an incoming missile. Nancy's heart clenched. The first few groups missed until a round finally got a piece of the missile, and it tumbled into the sea less than a yard short of Enterprise's starboard side. "Where did that come from?" Nancy demanded. "Captain AIC, Finn launched a Nulka," one of her watchstanders reported. "Looks like the missile went for Enterprise." "Fucking stupid," someone whispered. Nancy gulped. Using Nulka was a great way to defend your ship, but when the decoy deflected missiles, there was no telling where those missiles might go, and in a tight formation like this one, Tyler Marshall's last-ditch effort to save Finn almost killed the carrier. Attar gasped. "Oh God, Finn's going down." The OSS swung back to John Finn, still burning. Her rudder was still stuck hard over, and as she continued turning starboard, the destroyer's bow dipped deeper and deeper into the water. Each time, Finn's bow rose a little less. Nancy stared for a long moment, thinking of Tyler, a friend of over a decade, and his crew. Her chest felt impossibly tight. Finn and Fletcher were in the same destroyer squadron, trained together, fought together. White specks appeared on the video, hitting the water and exploding into bright orange life rafts. Human-sized shapes followed them, but not nearly enough. The other destroyer deployed with 350 sailors, many of whom would not escape that fiery inferno. "Focus, people!" Nancy's voice sounded harsh, even to her own ears. She spoke into the tactical net. Surface, Captain. Range to the Indians. 101 miles, ma'am, her surface warfare coordinator replied. Still too far for harpoons, Nancy hissed aloud. She wanted to hit the Indians back, but she needed her SM-6s to defend against those horribly fast BrahMos missiles, and supply snafus back home meant none of the ships deployed with naval strike missiles except John Finn, who wasn't going to fire them anytime soon. NSMs had a range of about 115 miles, which was more than 30 nautical miles greater than Nancy's harpoons, but that knowledge did her zero good. Nancy scowled. You think those sub-guys over on the carrier remember little things like harpoon ranges? Attar asked. We'll find out. Nancy shook her head, trying to clear it, then remembered the ASW helo her crew was ordered to launch a few minutes earlier. Get the helo back in the barn. No one's sub-hunting today. TAOI. Armistice Station's internal network was still up, so Alex poked around on his computer while Secretary Fowler paced and Admiral Hamilton read a book. Little though he liked her, Alex was more impressed with the admiral than the politician. Hamilton appreciated the trouble they were in, but the woman had nerves of steel. Fowler was in denial. Olsen looked up from texting. Sir, my friend at the Hilton says the French Marines are getting more threatening. Define more threatening. Alex's eyes narrowed. Like, they're actually pointing weapons at people. She walked over to show him a picture on her phone, which showed a French Marine pointing a rifle at a clumped group of civilians. They've pulled out rifles. Much more threatening than handguns. Alex's throat felt tight. This is going downhill fast. Same thing's getting mentioned all over the internal boards as people wake up. They're hauling residents right out of their quarters. But why? Hell if I know. Part of Alex demanded he do something, but what difference could they make? His team of 5, even if you added in their 4 guests and their security duo, had no legal authority. He clicked through another update on the station administrative chat group, and then froze before continuing to another page. Was that? Holy shit! Is that a list of the people they're rounding up? Olsen leaned close to look at the monitor. Alex clicked the link. Guess someone was stupid and forgot to turn my access off. There weren't many perks to his job, but some decade-old agreement said that the OIC got administrator-level access. That meant Alex could see documents and pictures shared with a small group, mainly the mayor and her regional managers. The list of authorized users was at the top, and Alex's name was above that of the group's newest member, J. Rochambeau. The names on the left side of the list outnumbered the right. The 2 headers read, Gathered, 757, and Remaining, 501. Alex licked his lips, his eyes scanning the list on the right. Yep, there were 9 names he recognized, right at the top. His heart pounded in his ears. Then the outer door slid open with a hiss, and Alex's head snapped around. Boss, Earhart will be here within the hour. Steph sailed past the security officers and into the office. But things are getting dicey topside. The Frenchies brought a couple hundred civilians up to Platform 3. Not sure where they're going, but my money says it's a ship. You want to see if you can hack your way to finding that? Alex asked, vacating his chair. Try it with my access. I will try. Steph grinned as she threw their alma mater's motto at him, plopping down. Alex turned to Bradshaw. You see anything interesting? Other than the empty-ass Norwegian cruise line ship pulling in? Bradshaw snorted. Looks like they're exiling people in luxury. You sure it was empty? Sir, ain't no cruise ship going to come in with no one hanging off the balconies. At the very least, there'll be drunks awake, and someone's going to be butt naked, he snickered. Not that I'd know that from personal experience or anything. Noted. Alex took a deep breath. All right, folks, we sit tight until Earhart is close enough, and then we go topside. She'll have to send a boat, so there won't be much room for luggage. That sentence was mostly aimed at Fowler and his aide, both of whom were surrounded by suitcases. Fowler sniffed. My belongings include critical State Department papers. Then you'd better shred them, Hamilton interrupted, not even looking up from her book. We can't have state secrets falling into the wrong hands. Was that sarcastic? It was impossible to tell. Alex kept his mouth shut. Don't be ridiculous, Fowler said. As I've said before, hiding here is the height of stupidity. Whatever methods the French are using to move civilians, they'll be more careful with a diplomatic delegation. They have to be. There are rules. Marines with rifles tend to make their own rules, sir, Alex said when Hamilton ignored Fowler. Fowler rolled his eyes. You military types all think force will solve anything, don't you? No, I think it creates more problems than it solves, but in case you missed it, Mr. Secretary, we didn't start this dance, Alex replied. We're just stuck with the music. How naive. Any diplomat will tell you. Turn the lights off, Olsen hissed. One of the security guys, the tall one with black hair, complied right away, plunging the office into darkness. Steph swore as the bright screen in front of her grew brighter, turning off the monitor, but Alex turned to Olsen. What's up? He whispered. Bunch of Marines outside heading this way. Better if they think we're all still stupid and in bed, Olsen replied. She crept forward, peeking out the lone side window. Both security officers took cover so no one could see them through the windows and the doors, and Alex felt a strange chill roll down his spine. A minute ticked by in slow motion, and then 2. Even Fowler held his breath. Finally, Olsen said, They're gone, but we might want to keep the front lights off. Good idea. You people are paranoid. Fowler's laugh was as brittle as it was arrogant. It's their job, isn't it? Gage asked. Olsen and Bradshaw shifted unhappily, but neither politician noticed. They continued disparaging the military, forgetting they shared the room with 7 people who wore the uniform. But they did stay away from the windows. 1 hour. Alex just had to put up with this bullshit for 1 more hour. 24. No more diplomacy. Carre hung up his phone and turned to Jules with a vicious smile, standing in the middle of Central like a conquering hero. The Vishal battle group has damaged 1 destroyer and is closing with the Americans to destroy the rest of their ships. How fortunate for them. Jules glanced at the monitors to his right, which showed internal security cameras. 2 platoons of Marines herded several hundred civilians toward the Platform 3 elevator bank. Resistance appeared light. Carre hissed aloud. They fired on my navy first. If the United States believes that India will roll over for them like a dog, they are very much mistaken. Is France prepared to do so? Jules bristled. We will continue to round up the Americans. The objective here is to humiliate our former friends, not murder civilians. You are conveniently forgetting the military personnel on this station. Carre crossed his arms. What to do with them? Jules' original orders said to force the Navy personnel off with the rest of the civilians, gently but firmly. But if those Americans learned of their carrier being shot at... I must call my superiors for instructions. Jules hated temporizing, but he was not authorized to kill anyone. Not yet. Of course, Captain. Carre's smile grew sharp. Do so. While you do, I will send people to search for American naval personnel. No, Jules shook his head. Those Marines are under my command, mon ami. A moment. Jules knew Carre's blood was up. If Jules did not manage things carefully, the semi-organized chaos on Armistice Station would become a bloodbath. Bloodbaths had their uses, as did terror and chaos, but Jules would not cause one by accident. particularly not if it went against France's best interests. Punching in the code to bypass Armistice Station's jamming, Jules dialed Admiral Bernard. It was just after 2200 back home, so he called the Admiral's personal cell phone. 3 rings later, a sleepy Jérémy Bernard answered the phone. "Capitaine Rochambeau, this best be an emergency." "Oui," Jules replied, wishing Carre did not speak French. Alas, the Indian admiral spoke twice as many languages as Jules. "Have you heard about the battle in the Strait of Malacca?" "The what?" Something crashed in the background. "What has happened?" "The Americans sank an Indian kilo. Now the Indians have attacked the Enterprise strike group." Jules sighed. "We have not yet rounded up all of our targets, although we are on schedule." "The Indians have attacked the Americans?" Bernard sounded stunned. "Oui. They have damaged 1 destroyer. It may be worse by now. I need to know what to do with the military targets on Armistice Station." "Merde." Jules let his words sink in while a Marine lieutenant approached, handing him a list of the American, British, and Australian residents and visitors already rounded up. Total, 1,658. Gathered, 757. Remaining, 501. "I must call the president," Bernard said after a moment. "I understand, but do not take long. Our Indian allies grow impatient," Jules replied, "and they will remind me of our agreement to support them, even with military action." "I will call back," Bernard promised and hung up. Of course, he provided no guidance. That left responsibility on Jules' shoulders. Jules was not a stranger to accountability. He would not captain a submarine if he did not live for the thrill of independent command. However, he preferred to avoid responsibility for national policy. "Well, Captain," Carre crossed his arms. "We will continue rounding up the undesirables," Jules said. "I see no reason to visit violence upon civilians who do not resist." "And the non-civilians here?" Jules shrugged. "I will await instructions." "We are at war, Captain. They are enemy combatants. If a few shots start a war, the world would have many more wars." Jules waved a hand. "And if your country's policy of humiliating America bore fruit, we would not be in this position," Carre said. "Have you forgotten China, Admiral?" Jules wanted to shake him, but one did not do that to admirals, even ones from other navies. "If you spoke to your allies before, it is too late for that. They sank our submarine." Jules walked away before he said something his country might regret. In theory, he was not against a war. It was his profession. But accidentally falling into one. Wars were instruments of diplomacy, a means to the end a country desired. His country needed unhindered access to resources in the Indian Ocean. America's meddling restricted that. If his nation desired war to clear the path to those resources, Jules would be happy to strike the first blow. But his nation did not want war. Otherwise, they would not have chosen subterfuge. Would not have acted when America was distracted elsewhere. Jules scowled. He did not like how rapidly things were changing. "They will negotiate an end to hostilities," Carre followed him to say. "America no longer has the will for a long war." "And how many limited wars has your country fought, sir?" Jules spun. "France learned the folly of that tactic while you were still a British colony." Carre turned an interesting shade of purple as Ada Ledoux walked in. "My communications team detected a bridge-to-bridge radio transmission, mon capitaine," she said to Jules, ignoring Carre. "The American Naval Detachment called Amelia Earhart to pick them up." Jules froze. "I thought you jammed all incoming communications." "Not bridge-to-bridge. We still have ships to dock. Would you prefer I shut down the lifeblood of this station?" Ledoux glared, hands on her hips. "No, of course not. Jules took a deep breath to calm his suddenly racing heart. Are the Americans still on one of the platforms? No, they disappeared back into the station. Jules held up a hand before Kare spoke. It seems we must be in agreement, Admiral. Allow me to call my Marines and have them round up our friends from the United States Navy. I hope they won't be too gentle. Kare's grin turned vicious again. We shall act as circumstances dictate. He would send Camille with the Marines, Jules decided. Firstly, because Admiral Hamilton deserved a modicum of respect. She also knew Commander Coleman, which could help. The sooner they rounded up their new enemies, the better. Then Jules could return to sea where he belonged. Sir, John Finn's going down, Rubino said. A long silence followed. No one knew what to say. Grief and fury swirled like fire in John's throat, warring with shocked numbness. The U.S. Navy hadn't lost a ship to enemy action since World War II. Yet here they were. Kidd launched a helicopter a few minutes earlier, and it hovered over the stricken destroyer, feeding FLIR video to the rest of the strike group. Every eye on the flag bridge watched the screen as Finn rolled left, going down bow first as sailors jumped overboard, swimming for life rafts. Water bubbled at her grave, and then went still, leaving less than half of her crew behind. Send someone to pick up the survivors, McNally whispered, his eyes still the size of doorknobs. We can't afford to slow, sir. John's throat was bone dry. We'll have to come back for them. We can't leave people in the water! McNally came out of his chair, stabbing a finger at John as he towered over him. Those sailors are my responsibility, and the Indians will attack again if we don't give them a reason not to. Should John yell at his admiral? The waiting was killing him. Every muscle in John's body tensed. Why hadn't the Indians fired? Modern war was fast-paced. Why were they waiting? McNally went red. Then shoot some goddamned harpoons at them while we slow, for Christ's sake. Why the hell haven't those destroyers done so already? We're outside harpoon range, sir, Rubino answered for John. What? But... McNally's mouth snapped shut. He was a submariner, like John. Submarines didn't fire harpoon anti-ship missiles often, but they could. And McNally should have remembered that the maximum range for a Harpoon 2 extended-range anti-ship missile was 82 nautical miles. What about NSMs? John grimaced. Only on Finn. Heading to the bottom now, he didn't add. The Indian formation slowed 5 minutes ago, keeping the range at an even 100 nautical miles. Enterprise and her escorts could steam straight at the Indians and brave their fire for 20 nautical miles, an eternity if the Indians steamed away from them to keep the range open, or they could somehow change the odds. Sir, we need to launch an airstrike, John said. We can't launch in the traffic separation scheme, Rubino objected. International law says we can only transit to our destination. I think that went out the window the moment the Indians started shooting, John replied. Silence hovered over the flag bridge like smoke. John could feel every eye on him. Now, since the Indians are jamming our long-range communications, we either need to open the range until we can get instructions, or talk to the Indians, or we need to shoot back. The U.S. Navy doesn't run away, McNally snapped. Call it a tactical retreat if you want, but even if we do, we need to launch aircraft first, because we won't get a chance if they start shooting again. McNally collapsed back into his chair. Someone get a satellite phone. I need to call this in. It might not work, sir, John said. They've got airborne jammers up. I'm damned well going to try. Grabbing the phone from his aide, McNally beelined out of the flag bridge, leaving John sitting at the command console by himself. What do you think they're waiting for, sir? Rubino asked. Instructions from home, John shrugged. Same as us. What happens if they get them first? John looked back at the large-screen tactical display. With fins sunk, Fletcher, Bella Wood, and Kidd grouped around Enterprise like guard dogs. But he heard the reports over the tactical net. The cruiser and both remaining destroyers used almost half their inventory of anti-air missiles in that first strike. Enterprise had 2/3 of her ESSMs left, but they wouldn't last long against the Indian battle group. Then we're in for a world of hurt, he said. No one answered. John took a deep breath. Find me those jammers. The French president called the Indian president, already awake thanks to the report of the Kilo-class submarine sinking. News that there were no survivors from that attack accompanied the notification that the admiral on INS Vishal fired on the Enterprise strike group. In another time, the Indian president would have called the White House and dealt with this via diplomatic means. But not after the second shooting incident this month, and not after the admiral on Vishal chose to engage Americans instead of talking to them. This stuck the Indian president in a corner, one that would require apologies and possible reparations to exit. No one in India was willing to bow that far. Not now. So he backed Vishal's admiral up to the hilt. Parliament was not in session, which meant the French president's decrees had the force of law. He gathered the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers anyway, because such decisions could not be made alone. Within 10 minutes, the Russian president joined the call, and the three conferred. India's economic reasons to push American interests out were obvious. France also still owned significant territory in the region, along with multiple underwater stations around the French islands surrounding Madagascar. Russia's intentions were less organic, but Russia was a rising power. The bad old days of the Cold War were back in one way. Anything that decreased American influence increased Russian. France and India knew Russia would not help them out of the goodness of her government's heart, but for now, Russia was a friend. A friend with a larger navy than Russia sported since the heyday of the USSR. Their choices were simple. 1. Withdraw now and negotiate a settlement, blaming local commanders for the conflict. 2. Continue the battle and destroy the Enterprise strike group. Claim Armistice Station by force and eject American influence from the region, risking war. 3. Hold what they'd taken and hope China remained a threat significant enough to keep the United States distracted. They all knew the third choice was unlikely. A fresh day already dawned in China, with reports of a three-way civil war looming. 4 separate governments claimed legitimacy in China now, none of which looked ready to back down. At least 2 of them possessed nuclear weapons. Whatever happened in China, odds were that the Americans would adopt the same wait-and-see attitude as the rest of the world. Facing off with a unified communist China was one thing. Civilized nations did not use nuclear weapons. Factions and rebels, on the other hand, might not be so discerning. In the end, they reached an agreement. I'm into the security system, Steph said. Alex walked over to where she still sat at his desk. Good job. He patted her on the shoulder. Keeping an eye on the enemy? Steph twisted to look at him, her smile crooked. We've got to call them something, sir. Yeah, he swallowed. I guess. Looks like there are 2 groups of French Marines out there. They've cleared everything southwest of Habitat 9 and west of West Cook, she said. It doesn't look like they've tried clearing Newell and its offshoots yet. I think they're still on the south side of Matera. Sounds about right based on what I saw earlier. Alex sipped his coffee. That meant the French hadn't gotten to the section of the station the naval detachment occupied, but were moving in their direction. They're concentrating on the hotels and the habitats before weeding out people like us. That fills me with confidence. Steph pointed at a camera view of a Marine squad. I'm not sure where this third group's going, though. Alex squinted. Is that Camille Dubois? Can you zoom in? This isn't TV, sir. I can't remote zoom the cameras if you don't want them to know I'm doing it, Steph snorted. I'm not sure these cameras can zoom anyway. They're ancient technology, not even 4K. Right, sorry, Alex grimaced. So where are these guys? By the Crown Plaza. See that sign in the corner? It's for the Transplat 5 elevator bank. A moment, Commander, Hamilton cut in. Surprisingly, she put aside her book and moved to the far side of the conference room. Chest tight, Alex rounded the table and came to her side. Yes, ma'am? I'd like to know your intentions. Her gaze was intent, but Alex couldn't tell what she was thinking. My priority is to get you, Secretary Fowler, and your aides off this station, ma'am. Earhart is the best way to do that. Too late, Alex realized he hadn't bothered asking permission. He'd just done what he thought was right. Admiral Hamilton was 3 or 4 light years senior to him. Alex was the station's officer in charge, but he should have run his plan by her. She crossed her arms. And then? Then I want to get my people out, preferably at the same time. He smiled without humor. This station's going to hell in a hurry, and I don't think it's a fun time or place to be an American. And you're including yourself in your people, Commander? Did that mean she wanted him to stay? Alex couldn't puzzle out her expression, so he went with the truth. I can't imagine I'd do a damned bit of good staying, ma'am. Not unless you wanted to give the French a propaganda victory, Hamilton frowned. And that's not happening, understood? Crystal clear, Admiral. Alex wanted to point out he wasn't an idiot, and he sure as hell wasn't some wannabe hero like Chris Kennedy. But Hamilton wasn't the kind of admiral you said that to. Alex's experience with admirals was that they were better avoided. None of them wanted to waste energy on a non-due course officer anyway, even the one that kicked him off his chosen career path. So he said nothing, and counted the minutes until Earhart returned. 25. Deadly Force. Lieutenant Commander Maria Vasquez and Lieutenant Jesse Lynn hung a left out of Elkman Tube and headed into the south end of Cook. Maria couldn't help staring at the underwater adventure park in the middle of the circular Cook Tube. Even looking at Cousteau's didn't make her believe it existed. Who in their right mind wanted to ride an underwater roller coaster? There were even parts of it that went above the domed roof of the tube, encased in specialized protective glass casing. Rumor said they planned to build a ski slope in one of the new hubs. If anyone could top the indoor ski slope in Dubai, it would be Armistice Station. She snuck more glances at the theme park as they headed towards the bottom of Cook. It really weirded her out. Cook East was administrative, but Cook West was the wild side. There were bars, stores, and every tourist spot imaginable. Maybe this place would be great for vacation, but why anyone with a brain put an international conference underwater mystified Maria. As a submariner, she was more than comfortable underwater, but the impracticality drove her batty. The loudspeaker to their right crackled. Guests and residents of Armistice Station, please remain within your quarters. The station is experiencing technical and environmental difficulties. However, all hotels and habitats are safe, so please remain inside. We will notify you when the situation changes. Thank you. The announcement repeated in multiple languages. Maria listened to the one in Spanish, picking out enough words to guess it meant the same thing. She wasn't fluent in Spanish, much to her aunt's chagrin. She could stumble through a conversation, but a rebellious college-aged Maria took Latin instead. Much good it did her. It's too quiet, Jessie whispered. Yeah? Maria saw a few people, mostly young. It's after 1 a.m. Nightlife's crazy here. Jesse shook his head. We're coming up on Fisher. Bradshaw calls it the Row of Sin. There's 4 bars, 2 strip clubs, a dance studio, 3 smoke shops that'll sell you almost anything, and a place that definitely doesn't arrange escorts, if you know what I mean. Sounds fun, Maria grinned. If, not a magnificent idea while on active duty. Jesse shook his head. Tell that to Bradshaw. He sounds like he's a joy to lead. Maria knew LS2 Bradshaw's type. There'd been 6 of them in her department on her last boat. No matter how often the brass tried to manage them out, colorful sailors were the Navy's heart and soul. He's a barrel of laughs. Jesse's smile vanished as 2 French Marines came around the corner from Earl. Crap. Keep it cool, Maria whispered. We won't be Americans if they ask. He shot her a sideways look. There aren't a lot of other countries you and I can both be from. Sure, you can pick anywhere Latin X, but how many other places can you get someone who's half Japanese and half Irish American? Maria bit her lip, studying his face. Jesse looked like the Japanese side of his ancestry, just taller than average and with hair a few shades lighter. Yeah, that's harder. Maybe we can call you Colombian if they squint. I'm not sure even our Marines are that dumb. I wish I disagreed. Maria glanced toward the French Marines again, just as another group came around the corner from the Earl tube, leading a gaggle of surly-looking Americans. Where are they coming from? Habitats 1 through 5 are down Earl, Jesse whispered. You live down there? Those seem to be the closest habitats to the Naval Detachment's offices. Jesse laughed. Nah, they stuck us out in the boonies. Me, Olson, and Steph are out in Habitat 9. Commander Coleman and Bradshaw are up in 7. Longer walk. That's crappy. Yeah, well, they didn't like the Kansas incident much around here. He shrugged. Maria pursed her lips. She knew too much about that. Working for Admiral Hamilton gave her a ringside seat to the investigation 4 months ago. Maria wasn't sure who she agreed with. Commander Kennedy was on the fast track, a go-getter who seemed poised for great things. But he also hit on her with the subtlety of an enraged bear, and anyone who lacked self-control around women wasn't someone she wanted to work for. Hamilton didn't like Kennedy either, but Maria knew the boss reserved the bulk of her ire for Alex Coleman. Hamilton didn't like people who worked outside the rules. She disapproved of cowboys. Hamilton completed 2 successful command tours without putting a foot wrong, and she demanded the same from everyone else. Maria was fine with that. She, too, was a perfectionist. But nothing about the Kansas incident was simple, and just thinking about it left Maria uneasy. Hey, you! A French Marine shouted, and Maria froze. Stop! Jesse grabbed her arm. Say something. Maria swallowed, turning as innocent eyes on the Marine as she could manage, and groping for the right words in Spanish. Nos? Oui. One Marine strode up. He was young and fresh-faced, probably the junior guy who got the suckiest jobs. Maria tried not to glance at the rifle slung over his right shoulder. You are American, no? No, Maria shook her head. Colombiana. Colombiana. The Marine frowned, and then turned to an officer and spoke in rapid-fire French. Finally, he turned back towards them. You will come with us. Why? She couldn't think of the Spanish word and asked in English. All Americans come with us. Jesse tried speaking up. But we aren't. Ce n'est pas d'important. The Marine shook his head. Come with me. We're Colombian. Maria tried to hang back, but the Marine grabbed her by the arm and propelled her towards the crowd. He said something in French, but the eye roll was universal. Sure you are. The second Marine gestured with his rifle, and Jesse followed her without protest. They found themselves in the front ranks of the American crowd, next to a pair of old ladies dressed to the nines. It was a good try, dear. one of them said with a smile. Better than we managed when they pulled us out of the Stars and Shells casino. I don't know what you mean. Maria tried to infuse a Spanish accent into her voice and failed. Of course you don't. The second woman, dressed in red and black, patted her on the shoulder. I'm Pam, and this is Cassie. Maria and Jessie. She wouldn't mention their ranks. The French seemed polite enough, if forceful, with civilians. How would they treat naval officers? Maria didn't want to find out. Her chest was tight enough that she worried her breathing would give away her nerves. Maria wiped her hands on her pants, wishing she dared take her phone out and send a text. Pam tutted. Aren't you too cute? Welcome to the horrific end of an otherwise lovely vacation. Thanks, I think. Maria glanced around, counting Marines. 12. That's a lot to watch 26 civilians. Were they paranoid or just thorough? The Marines walked on the edges of the crowd, their attention flicking between the civilians and the path ahead. They're well trained, and obeying that training. Where are you taking us? Jessie asked the lead Marine, the one who looked like an officer. Maria wasn't sure what 3 shoulder stripes meant for a French Marine, but it was more than anyone else had. To a cruise liner. The officer's English was good. His sneer was, too. You will be taken off station in comfort. But to where? Pam nudged forward, eyeing the Marine like a recalcitrant grandchild. I'm too old for a round-the-world cruise, young man. I hope you're not going to try to take us all the way back to the U.S. in some dingy ship. You'll go to Madagascar. Madagascar? Really? Pam reared back as if slapped. Couldn't you at least take us to the Seychelles? They have better casinos. The Marine ignored her. Maria continued looking for escape routes, but every time she drifted to the edge of the crowd, that same young Marine was there to glare until she returned to the old lady's side. Did they realize what she was? Or were they just paranoid? McNally had been gone too long. A ball of tension coiling in his spine, John grabbed an intership radio and headed after the admiral. The Indians still hadn't followed up on their initial attack, which left John uneasy. Maybe not picking up John Finn's survivors was a mistake. Had the Indians realized what a monumental mistake they'd made? Sure, Indian MiGs continued to circle their carrier, but they hadn't headed towards Enterprise and her escorts. Yet. 25 minutes felt like a lifetime. That was more than enough time for McNally to call someone important and get updated rules of engagement. Standard ROE said they could only fire if fired upon, but no one expected one major nation's carrier strike group to attack another's. The U.S. had to be the responsible adults, a fact that burned in John's gut like acid. Do we really have to stand by and let them sink an American destroyer and kill God knows how many sailors? That outcome was likely if their luck continued. John hoped like hell McNally got another answer, or that the Indians would back off and let the diplomats handle things. He should want a diplomatic solution, right? Not revenge. Revenge was for movies. John lived in the real world, where war was a terrible thing. Finding the admiral was easy. He hadn't gone out on the bridge wing. Instead, McNally walked down 2 levels to stand near a chaff launcher 2 sailors were busy reloading. He held the satellite phone at waist level, staring out at the ocean with that same blank expression from earlier. John swallowed back a rising tide of dread. Sir? John asked. McNally didn't twitch. Admiral? Finally, McNally turned. John, how are things? Quiet so far, but the Indians have launched aircraft. You get a hold of anyone, sir? John wanted to shake sense into his boss, but he feared it wouldn't work. None of the numbers we have are answering. McNally looked back out to sea. His voice was tiny. Even the strike group home contact went to voicemail. John swallowed. Radio should have a list of emergency contacts. Can't you just call the 7th Fleet duty officer? Enterprise's home port was Norfolk, Virginia, as part of 2nd Fleet. But their operational commander was 7th Fleet. Upon entering the Strait of Malacca, they chopped, or changed operational command, from 5th Fleet to 7th Fleet. John had never operated in 7th Fleet's area of operations, but he knew how this worked. He was an East Coast sailor, spent a lot of time in the Arabian Gulf and the Atlantic, with the occasional Mediterranean cruise thrown in to keep sailors happy. McNally blinked. I suppose I could. The roar of jet engines cut him off, and John whirled around to see an F-35 catapult off the deck. Flight deck personnel ran about with grim purpose, readying more aircraft. Before John could open his mouth, a second F-35 took off, with replacements already taxiing toward the carrier's catapults. What the hell is Edwards thinking? McNally went red again. If he thinks he can launch without my permission, he's got another thing coming. Come on. John grabbed his admiral by the arm and dragged him to the ladder. Yeah, the carrier CO should have requested the admiral's permission before launching aircraft, particularly in this damned powder keg. But Captain Edwards was no idiot. If he gave the order to launch, they were in trouble. John shoved McNally up the ladder first, the deafening sounds of jet engines growing louder. They sprinted forward 20 feet, where John threw open another door so they could climb another ladder, this time inside the skin of the ship. The doors to the flag bridge were open, and they burst through. Indian aircraft inbound, Rubino said. 60 nautical miles and closing fast. John slammed into his chair and threw his headset on. The tactical plot showed at least a dozen aircraft inbound. Enterprise so far launched 4 in response. How fast can we get more aircraft up? He asked. We've only got 4 catapults, sir, Rubino replied. It'll be a few. They changed formation course without permission, McNally muttered, shaking his head. Why would they do that? Echo Bravo, this is Echo Whiskey, Captain Rosario on Bella Wood said over the tactical net. The call sign Echo Whiskey designated Bella Wood and her CO as the air defense commander, which meant the cruiser had tactical control over the aircraft and the entire strike group's missile defense. Request batteries released to engage incoming aircraft, over. Don't you dare! McNally spun on Rubino when she opened her mouth to respond. We can't fire on those aircraft unless they fire on us. John almost choked. Admiral, their destroyers already fired on us. It's not the same. Echo Bravo, this is Echo Whiskey. 5 minutes to enemy aircraft intercept, over. John stared at the screen as the red icons representing Indian fighters drew closer and closer, swallowing back fear. The Mikoyan MiG-29M was an old but reliable airframe. Designed for the Russian Navy in 1988, it ended up in India first. Operational since 2004, MiG-29s remained the mainstay of the Indian Navy, with 24 carried by each of India's 4 aircraft carriers. Aircraft were not John's area of expertise. He knew more about helicopters than fighters, because helos hunted submarines, and fighters were too fast to bother. But he knew MiG-29s carried the Russian-made Kh-29MP missile, nicknamed Kedge by NATO. That missile was slower than the BrahMos missiles the destroyers threw at them earlier, but the fighters would shoot from much closer. Sir? Rubino gestured at the plot. Damn, those fighters moved fast. McNally stared, wide-eyed at the screen. I still need to call... Admiral, we've either got to shoot them or expect to be shot, John said. The tactical net crackled. Echo Bravo, Echo Whiskey, 4 minutes to intercept. Enemy range 50 miles. Warnings have been sent and ignored. McNally said nothing. Admiral! John tried one more time, silently counting to 5. He didn't know what was wrong with McNally and didn't have time to care. Someone had to do something. He keyed his microphone. Echo Whiskey, this is Echo Bravo. Batteries release. Engage incoming aircraft. Over. Echo Whiskey, roger. Break. Kid, engage bandits. Over. McNally whirled on him. John, I'd rather be damned for shooting than not, sir. In the sky, 4 Enterprise F-35C Lightning fighters faced 12 Indian MiG-29Ms. The American aircraft were newer, faster, and better armed than their Indian counterparts, but they were severely outnumbered. Each Lightning carried 6 AIM-120 AMRAAM anti-air missiles. In contrast, the Indian MiG-29s carried 2 KH-29 anti-surface missiles and 4 Vimpel NPO K-77PD anti-air missiles. The 2 sets of anti-air missiles were roughly equal in warhead power and speed. Directed by Bellawood into sectors ahead of the Enterprise strike group, the American fighters fired first, each Lightning shooting salvos of 2 AMRAAMs. The missiles streaked out from under the aircraft's wings, jets of light against a still dark night sky. Each salvo targeted 1 Indian fighter, and the Lightnings kept firing. The Lightnings knew their only chance to defeat the Indian fighters was to shoot them down before they could return the favor. But the MiGs started firing seconds after the Americans, 24 Vimpel anti-air missiles arcing out from their aircraft. The Lightnings evaded, attempting to shoot the incoming missiles down. 1 fighter managed, another ate a missile and ejected, and then the Indians fired their second wave of Vimpels. 3 Indian fighters exploded before they could fire, but that still left 9 MiGs and 18 anti-air missiles in the air. The 3 remaining American fighters went evasive, heading back towards the strike group for support. A second was shot down, and then the third, before Kidd started firing SM-2 missiles at the Indian fighters. Kidd was a hair's breadth too slow. All 9 remaining MiGs fired their KH-29 anti-surface missiles at the strike group. 26. Sour. All stations, Enterprise! Enterprise is hit! I say again, Enterprise is hit! Nancy's head whipped around as those words came over the tactical net. Her OSS operator heard them too and slewed the camera over to the fireball on Enterprise's flight deck. Oh, fuck, Nancy whispered, knowing what must have happened. 1 missile made it past their defenses and slammed right into the most precious piece of real estate in the entire strike group. The impact was forward of Enterprise's first 2 catapults, burning fiercely. Through the OSS, Nancy could see sailors rushing out to fight the fires, but she couldn't afford distraction, and she couldn't help. Instead, she looked back down at her tactical plot. At least Kidd's SM-2s downed the last MiGs. Only 1 Lightning remained in the air, and unless Enterprise got that fire under control, no others would launch. That guy can't land, either. The Indian strike group remained about 100 miles south, with their shadow, Porbandar, 25 miles north. Nancy frowned. Porbandar didn't shoot during the first engagement. Why not? Stopping BrahMos missiles from her would be a right bitch. She was too close for multiple counter-missile launches. What the hell is Porbandar waiting for? She asked. Attar frowned. Maybe they're not loaded with warshots? We're in the Indians' backyard. Maybe they don't carry live missiles for training any more than we do. I hope you're right. Nancy leaned back and stared at the display. Porbandar remained out of visual range. They had a good radar track on her, though. Nancy keyed her mic for the tactical net. Echo Bravo, this is Fletcher. Request permission to engage shadowing Indian destroyer with bulldogs. Over. There was a lengthy pause. Fletcher, this is Echo Bravo, negative. That unit has not fired upon us, the Battle Watch captain replied. Nancy thought she heard arguing in the background. She scowled. Fletcher, Roger out. Attar shrugged. It was worth a... Vampire, 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 her air warfare coordinator said over Fletcher's internal net. New strike inbound, bearing 088, estimate 40, I say again 40 missiles inbound. Air, Captain, designate 1 bird per incoming missile. Nancy hated giving that order, but her destroyer had only 20 SM-6s left. She had 36 ESSMs too, but those were short-ranged weapons. Fletcher needed to shoot down 1/3 of the missiles aimed at the strike group. Using 1 missile per threat on the first salvo meant she'd have missiles left for follow-on salvos. Plus, her ESSMs were for last-ditch defense. Damn, she missed Finn right about now. Air, aye, her air warfare coordinator responded. Birds away. Fletcher vibrated as 13 SM-6 missiles erupted out of her forward and aft cells. Nancy swallowed and tried to appear calm. Yet again, the flight time was about a minute, and the Indians remained out of harpoon range. They had to take the fire until they could fight back. Why the hell is Admiral McNally waiting so long to close the range? Attar asked. I wish I knew. Nancy could ask, but the tactical net was for tactics, and McNally had a staff for that. John had to be all over this. He wasn't an idiot. Still, Nancy was learning that combat made idiots out of a lot of people. She could only pray John Dalton wasn't one of them. All stations, Enterprise. I'm launching aircraft using midships catapults, Captain Edwards said over the tactical net. Request you confirm positive ID before committing birds, over. Nancy's jaw dropped. Attar acknowledged the message and then turned to her with wide eyes. That's ballsy, ma'am, Attar said. Captain Edwards can count, David. Nancy licked her lips. He knows we'll run out of missiles before the Indians do, and they can keep us out of range, so the only way to hit back is to get lightnings in the air. What were the lightnings armed with? Likely AMRAAMs. Could those hit a ship? A bunch of American pilots were about to find out, assuming Enterprise could get them off deck. Nancy watched the battle through the OSS camera, holding her breath. She couldn't do anything to defend her destroyer aside from giving the orders she already had. Modern technology made her crew mere bystanders as Fletcher's Aegis combat system selected targets and married missiles to them. 2 fighters screamed off Enterprise's deck between Fletcher, Bellawood, and Kidd's missile salvos, turning immediately into the safety corridor between the ship's launch zones. Another 2 fighters taxied to the catapults far quicker than they'd normally dare, deck crews sprinting around them to line each lightning up for launch. SM-6s roared out faster than Kidd's remaining SM-2s. Their last Arleigh Burke-class destroyer spent all her more advanced missiles against the first wave. But there were more missiles in this wave than the one that killed John Finn. Nancy swallowed. Damn the Indians for exploiting known American tactics. Kidd put all 12 of her remaining SM-2s into the air, but they were far too slow. Only 2 intercepted the maneuvering BrahMos missiles, leaving the other 10 for the strike group's second salvo. Fletcher quivered again, launching another 8 SM-6s. That left her with only 7 anti-air missiles, but Nancy had no choice. Conserving ammunition only helped if the ship survived, as the 24 missiles John Finn took to the bottom proved. Bellawood launched another 5 SM-6s, and then all 3 ships' Aegis weapon systems shifted to evolved Sea Sparrow missiles. Kidd launched 8 ESSMs with the other ship's SM-6s, and then Enterprise joined the fray, launching 4 ESSMs of her own as the BrahMos missiles closed from 50 miles out to 20 in the blink of an eye. Fletcher launched another 8 ESSMs, but Bellawood did not. Hang fire! Bellawood deluging cells and forward VLS, a panicked voice said over the tactical net. Nancy held her breath. The cruiser was their most powerful unit, and her forward VLS banks had room for 72 missiles. How many of her remaining ESSMs were in the forward bank? They were loaded in packs of 4, which meant the hang fire put at least 3 other ESSMs out of commission. A hang fire was a missile whose rocket booster ignited without the missile restraint bolts releasing. The immediate response was to deluge the 8-cell VLS module with water, which might drown as many as 32 ESSMs. Nancy forced herself to watch the tactical display instead of worrying about Bella Wood. Missiles met missiles. Explosions peppered the night sky. A corner of Nancy's mind imagined the view from the bridge, but her place was in CIC. "All targets destroyed," Attar reported. Nancy nodded, lifted her chin. "We're getting better at this. All stations, this is Echo Bravo. Immediate execute. New formation course 135. Captain Dalton's voice ordered. Someone in the back of CIC whooped. Nancy didn't turn to see who. "Formation speed, 31 knots over." Nancy felt the tightness in her chest ease. The second 2 lightnings launched, followed by 2 more. Nothing would make up for John Finn's loss, but the Enterprise strike group turned to close the enemy. Now we get our shot. Her eyes narrowed as the range decreased. They were 96 miles away from the Indians. They needed 14 nautical miles before harpoons from Fletcher, Bella Wood, and Kidd could reach out to touch someone. Commander Camille Dubois' cell phone rang. "Oui, mon capitaine." "I have received word from Admiral Bernard," Jules said without preamble. "He wishes the American admiral taken alive, and also their Undersecretary of State." "The others?" Camille asked. Jules chuckled. "We would prefer them alive, if reasonably practical. If not, use deadly force as required." "I will capture the officers alive." Her smile hurt her face. The idea of Alex Coleman as a prisoner of war warmed her heart. "The objective of this operation remains the humiliation of the American government. The more prisoners we take, the greater leverage we have. But do not take unnecessary risks, and do not let the Indians find them first," she heard him snarl. "I will have Bretagne deal with Amelia Earhart." "Merci." Camille schooled her smile down. "Bonne chance." "Merci." Jules hung up, leaving Camille with her 12 Marines. That was enough to capture 5 naval officers, 2 sailors, and 4 civilians, was it not? She turned to Lieutenant Travers, the senior Marine. "Lieutenant, you have my permission to shoot the 2 security officers if they do not surrender," she said. Travers stopped cold. "Pardon?" "We will ask them to surrender." Camille met Travers's eyes. "But we will not wait too long. Understood?" Travers swallowed. "We will not let the Indians capture the Americans, Lieutenant," she continued. "The American admiral presents a unique intelligence opportunity that France will capitalize upon, not India." "Are the Indians not our allies?" "Oui, but alliances are temporary, no?" Camille spent too much time in intelligence to think otherwise. India and Russia were today's friends. Tomorrow might be different. She still found the Indians' precipitous attack on the American carrier strike group difficult to stomach, if only because it was foolishly done. And the American attack on the Kilo-class submarine was just stupid. What kind of idiot attacked a submarine which had not shot at them? One afraid of being sunk. Camille suppressed a smile. The Americans were afraid. That was a first. "Come," she said. "Their office is not far." Camille consulted her map of Armistice Station. The place was a maze growing outwards from the original hub of Cook Tube. She and her team were south of Cook now. They split off from the group clearing Habitat 10 and the Armistice Crown Plaza. Those Marines continued dragging enemy civilians out of the hotel, while Camille led a dozen others north, towards the center of the station. Once they reached Cook, they would have to bypass Earl, which included Central, where Camille's captain remained in command, and then turn down Elkman, which ran parallel to Earl. From there, it was a quick walk to the American Naval Detachment Office. With that office at the end of Elkman, they would have nowhere to go. This would be easy. "Captain, DCO, forward fire is under control," Enterprise's damage control officer reported over the radio. Midship's fire is out. Reflash watch set. Overhaul in progress. 14 wounded, transported to medical. 3 confirmed dead by Doc Holmes. Captain Ernest Edwards couldn't sigh in relief and weep simultaneously, so he took refuge in professionalism. "Thanks, Wes," he replied, and then turned to his officer of the deck. "How are we holding up, Simon?" Lieutenant Commander Simon Pickering was one of the few surface warfare officers assigned to Enterprise, but he was a hell of a ship driver. "We're holding 31 knots, but Cheng says the vibrations will get worse if we go faster." He grinned. "Apparently a hole in the flight deck does wicked things to our structural integrity." Imagine that. Ernest didn't want to think of what that hole did to the innards of his beautiful carrier, aside from causing the 2 major fires his crew fought to a standstill. Enterprise would need a long time in the yards to fix that hole, but she could still launch aircraft. That was enough. "Captain, CDC, we have 4 ESSMs remaining," his tactical action officer reported over an internal net. "Yeah, I noticed you covering Kidd's sector in the second salvo," he replied, chewing his lip. "Pass the word to Pre-Fly to arm the second squadron of Lightnings with LS-RAM. LS-RAM I. That'll delay launch a few minutes, Captain." "I know," Ernest sighed. The AGM-158C long-range anti-ship missile was the best anti-ship missile the Navy had, and most warships still didn't carry it. He wished to hell that some of the shooters had LS-RAM in their VSL cells, but the best they had were late-model harpoons. However, the LS-RAM had a range of up to 200 nautical miles, which was enough to reach the Indians. It wasn't a quick missile, but the fighters could get it in close. I need to stop thinking like a pilot defending the carrier and start thinking like a carrier CO using all available tools to survive, he thought, and then asked, "How's Seawiz looking?" "Plenty of rounds for all 3 mounts," the TAO said. But the roar of 2 fighters launching drowned out the rest of the response. Ernest bared his teeth. That made 6 more Lightnings in the air. If the Indians didn't hurry, he would lay down a world of hurt on them. He just hoped the pilots from his 3 downed Lightnings could survive in the water until the strike group turned back for them. 2 parachutes had been visible after the fighters went down, and Ernest prayed the other escaped. But there was no time to check, only time to keep charging at the enemy. "TAO, Captain, say again. Lost you in the jet wash," he said, watching the next 2 fighters taxi to the catapults. "Sir, we're getting weird rumblings from the flag bridge. Something's wrong up there." Define something. Ernest felt cold. He made the call to launch fighters and change formation course to support that, without asking the admiral, because it protected his ship, but he expected McNally's support on that front. The TAO's pause spoke volumes. "I'm not sure, sir, but I recommend you give the admiral a call," she said. "Captain I." Ernest put the internal net phone aside and picked up the intership telephone, punching in the number for the admiral's station on the flag bridge. It rang for far too long. "Flag bridge, Dalton." "John, it's Ernest." He pushed aside lurking worry. "Is the admiral available?" "He's otherwise occupied right now, sir. But if you send your traffic, I'll relay." Dalton's voice was almost normal. "My TAO thinks there's some hijinks going on down there, but I'm trying to launch fighters with a hole the size of a semi in my flight deck. I don't have time for drama. Tell me the ground truth," Ernest said. John hesitated. "The Admiral's okay, sir. We're focused on closing with the enemy and getting comms with the home guard." "Right." Ernest didn't believe a word of it, but one didn't call your fellow captain a liar, not without evidence. "Any luck getting through this jamming?" "Nothing long range," John replied. "Short-range comms are fine, but no one answered the numbers the Admiral tried to call. I sent his aide to try again. We're looking for the jammer, but they're hiding pretty good up there." Yeah, something was wrong if McNally was calling instead of engaged in the combat problem. But how could Ernest say that? He thanked John, hung up, and turned his attention back to his wounded carrier. 8 fighters in the air. 9. Then 12 more Indian MiGs dove out of the clouds just 20 miles from Enterprise. 27. Shots heard round the world. Chest tight with nerves, Alex wandered over to talk to the security officers still standing near the doors. Both worked for the Diplomatic Security Service, which was the State Department's version of the Secret Service, just less famous. They seemed professional, but Alex hadn't even gotten their names, a choice which now felt very foolish. "You guys need anything?" he asked, feeling Hamilton's eyes burning into the back of his head. "We're good," the taller one said, "though a way out of this underwater coffin wouldn't go amiss." Alex grinned. "Give me 10 minutes and I'll have something for you." "Yeah?" "Yeah. Amelia Earhart should be here then." Alex watched both guards relax. "But it's better if we keep our heads down until the last minute." "We're all for that," the shorter one said. "Less trouble you guys find, the better. I'm all for a sedate walk up to a ship." "It'll be a walk up to a boat to the ship, but we'll try to keep it quiet," Alex chuckled. "Just for you. You guys got names, by the way?" "Eric Dixon," the tall one replied. "Damian Montero." "It's a pleasure to actually meet you both." Alex shook both hands. "Sorry we didn't—" "Boss, I think they're coming this way." Steph's words made Alex's head snap around. "The Marines?" "Yeah, plus that chick in a naval officer's uniform, the one you recognized?" She leaned close to the computer screen. "Small group of them just reached the southern end of Cook." Shit. Alex walked back, needing to see for himself. His heart sank. This time Camille Dubois stood much closer to a camera, and there was no mistaking the sneer on her face. "On a shingle." Steph's grin was brief. "What's our move?" Alex hesitated, looking at the monitor and then at the time. Earhart would probably need longer than 10 minutes. Even if she was on time, putting a boat in the water took time. And if the locals were a mite touchy about it... "Holy shit, someone got shot!" It started with an argument. 2 20-something-year-olds didn't agree with a French Marine pushing them to take a left towards the bottom of Cook. They objected. A Marine said something obnoxious, and next Maria knew both youths were on the ground. "Get off me, dude!" The blonde girl scrambled to her feet, shying back as one of the Marines grabbed for her arm. Her friend, a dark-skinned man, was a touch slower. Another Marine grabbed him, gesturing with his rifle. "You both come, this is not optional." "Leave us alone!" The girl stepped forward to push the Marine away from her friend. Crack! "Beth?" The Marine stumbled back, his eyes wide. The friend surged forward. "Beth!" The blonde swayed and dropped like a rock, red, blossoming in her midsection as she collapsed to the ground. Maria stepped forward without thinking, only to find a rifle in her face. She froze. "Stop," another Marine hissed. This one was short and young. To Maria, he looked like a kid on his first deployment, in over his head and trying so hard to follow orders. But those orders didn't cover a girl being shot, and everything in Maria screamed to do something. "I can help her." Maria tried a steadying deep breath, barely able to tear her eyes away from the bleeding young woman. "Beth." "I know first aid." "No, you stay." "Look, man, if you don't want dead civilians on your hands, you need to let us help." Jesse stepped up beside her. "That doesn't have to be fatal, not if we get our help fast. I'm sure one of you has a first aid kit, and—" "You stay!" The rifle jerked for emphasis. Jesse stopped cold, holding his hands up. "Don't be an idiot." Pam marched forward like a sassy and glittery fairy godmother, glaring at the Marine and shoving his rifle aside. "Whatever your superiors want, it's not a bunch of dead tourists. So pull your head out and step aside, young man." "You step back!" The young Marine's eyes were wide, and his rifle swung to point at Pam. He added something in French, something high-pitched and panicked. One of his compatriots knelt next to Beth, but another 2 turned their direction. Look, Sonny, I'm not trying to argue with your big bad gun, Pam said. But that girl needs help, and these people seem ready to do just that, so just let them— Tais-toi! Shut up! The Marine surged forward instead of stepping back, and, too late, Maria saw his finger tightening on the trigger. No! Jesse shot forward. Maria grabbed for him and missed, a split second too late. Crack! Pam's eyes went wide and she stumbled back. For a moment, Maria thought she was shot, but the old woman caught her balance as Jesse crumbled to the ground, blood spurting from his neck. Jesse! Maria shoved the shocked Marine aside, nearly earning herself a rifle butt to the head and never noticing. Shit! Anyone got a cloth? Scarf? Anything? Jesse had been in motion, and nerves jerked the Marine's rifle high. The bullet hit Jesse high in the left shoulder, shattering his collarbone and digging into a major artery. Maria fell to her knees at his side, desperately pressing her palms to the wound. Hang in there, Jesse, she whispered. He didn't seem to hear her, but blood bubbled up between her fingers, and— What the hell is wrong with you people? Pam knelt at her side, handing her a sparkling blue scarf. Here, dear. The glitter couldn't help a wound, but an infection beat bleeding to death, so Maria pressed it against the wound with blood-covered hands. Jesse gurgled something, his brown eyes glassy, and then went silent. Jesse? Maria shook him. Jesse! Shouting in French came from above. Pam's hand squeezed her shoulder before someone jerked her away. Pam yelped, but Maria ignored her. Her right hand felt for a pulse as she held the scarf down left-handed, finding nothing. Nothing. And hands pulled her up. Maria fought blindly, trying to pull away, but 2 French Marines pulled her along, shouting at the rest of the civilians to follow and shoving them when they did not. I am sorry, madame, the French officer said, but Maria didn't hear it. Say again? Shock forced the words out of Alex's mouth. He froze still next to Steph. Bradshaw gestured at the security feed on Steph's laptop, where he and Olson watched one set of Marines and civilians, while Steph spied on the other 2. Like, no shit, shots fired and someone went the fuck down? Can I rewind this thing, Ops? Not without them knowing. Steph sounded as numb as Alex felt. Someone like who? Fowler demanded. Even Hamilton looked up from her book, her brow furrowing. A civilian? She asked. Looks like, ma'am. Bradshaw swallowed. Oh, fuck, that's Lieutenant Lynn. What? Alex rushed over, but a crowd blocked the view of whoever was on the floor, lying in an ever-increasing puddle of blood. Oh, God. Alex's hands wanted to shake. Bile rose in his throat. Could that be Jesse? Bradshaw would know. What the hell? Hamilton was by his side, glaring wide-eyed at the same screen. No one answered. A French Marine pulled a kicking woman away from the dead body. Jesus, that's Jesse. The whisper was ragged. Alex needed several moments to realize it was his. And Maria, Hamilton added. Her voice sounded hollow. They watched in stunned silence as Marines pulled Maria away. 2 lifted Jesse's body by the legs and arms. Another pair lifted the first victim. Was either alive? Alex didn't think Marines carried living victims casually. They exited that camera view while Alex and the other stood motionless. Jesse was dead. Alex swallowed. How the hell could... I don't know, but there's going to be hell to pay. Hamilton met his eyes, and for the first time, they agreed on everything. Silence roared around them. Jesse was dead. What was Alex going to say to his girlfriend? Samantha came out to the station just a month earlier, and Alex knew Jesse planned on popping the question next time he went home. She was a nice girl, and so crazy about Jesse. Jesse. Damn it all. He was kind to a fault, and yeah, sometimes slow on the uptake, but... Alex shook himself. He couldn't focus on that, not now. First, they needed to get out of here. Then Admiral Hamilton could light the French on fire. Not to be that guy, but aren't those same assholes headed here? Bradshaw asked. Kinda seems a bit more, problematic now. Yeah. Alex squared his shoulders. Time to head upstairs, folks. His chest was tight, but his voice was surprisingly even. Steph, bring your laptop and download everything you can. I think the government will want this footage when everything is over. Sir, we can't... Olsen trailed off, still staring at the screen. Steph unplugged it and closed the laptop, shoving it and the cord into a bag she shouldered. We've got to, Alex said around the lump in his throat. We've got 2 guns between the 8 of us and no authority. The best thing we can do is make sure the entire fucking world knows what happened here. Steph glanced at Alex's computer again. They're up to Earl and Cook. Looks like another group is coming from the habitats further down Earl. Let's go. Leave anything you can't easily carry. He directed the last at Fowler and Gage, who seemed to think there would be room on a small boat for their rolling suitcases. Both ignored him as Alex led the group out of the office and down the Elkman tube, dragging those stupid suitcases and glaring at the security officers when neither offered to help. Both DSS officers had their guns out. Neither said a word about the shooting, but they didn't have to, did they? Where are we headed? Dixon asked Alex. The taller security officer was 1 step behind Alex, and his hands weren't shaking. Just down this tube into the elevator up to Platform 3. That's where Earhart moored before, and that's where she'll meet us. Are you sure using an elevator is wise, Commander? Couldn't they cut the power? Hamilton asked from right behind him. Alex resisted the urge to jump away from her. Unless you really want to climb 300 feet of stairs, it's our best chance. I see. He could hear her frown, but Alex glanced over his shoulder anyway. Did you get a hold of Commander Vasquez? He asked. No. A glower. She's not answering her phone. Alex bit back a swear as they reached the elevator bank. He punched the up button. Keep trying. Hamilton's glare was withering. I'm so glad I have you to remind me of that, Commander. Ma'am, The elevator dinging saved Alex from further response. Let's go. They piled into the elevator, bags and all. Alex had no time to grab anything from his quarters, but what was there that he cared about? Alex hadn't brought anything to Armistice Station he couldn't live without. 16 years as a submariner taught him not to haul much around. Yeah, he'd miss his scuba gear and the 2 custom suits he got at Fromo's, but they weren't that important. The elevator ride seemed to take forever. No one spoke after the doors slammed shut. Steph hugged her bag to her chest, eyes a shade too wide, but anger making her posture stiff. Bradshaw still looked stunned, too stunned to yelp when Gage dropped a suitcase on his foot. Olsen, closest to the security guys, eyed their sidearms enviously, while Gage and Fowler watched the stupid suitcases. Good God. Hamilton's whisper sounded so out of character that Alex did a double take. Her face was white and her eyes wide, staring at the phone in her hands as the elevator rumbled upwards. Admiral? Maria texted me, Hamilton replied. She confirmed that Jesse, Lieutenant Lynn, is dead. Alex closed his eyes on tears he would not shed. Ding. The elevator doors opened as Hamilton extended her phone. Alex read the words numbly, staring at the screen. Got caught up in a group the French rounded up. French shot civilian and Jesse Lynn. Civilian wounded. Jesse dead. Olson shoved Alex out of the elevator, making him stumble. "Come on, sir," Olson said. "Let's get out of here." "Yeah," he made himself nod. "Steph, get on the radio to that oiler." He led the group down the pier, glancing at the French frigate. Its quarterdeck was lit up, but shadows shrouded most of the warship. There didn't seem anything other than the normal night watch stationed, but you could hide a lot of sailors inside a ship. Was that a radar rotating? Did surface ships do that in port? Subs didn't, but subs had a lot fewer radars. "This doesn't make any sense," he whispered. Alex's muscles felt like compressed springs waiting to explode. "Maria said they shot him by accident." Hamilton's shoulders slumped. "Just a stupid accident." But why shoot anyone at all? Alex couldn't wrap his mind around it. Why kill anyone? And bullets. Bullets are a shit weapon inside an underwater station. What the hell do they think this will accomplish for them? The international community won't stand for this. "I don't care." Hamilton's voice was hard. "I'm going to bury them." "You?" Fowler sniffed. "You'll need my help with that, Admiral." Hamilton spun to glare at Fowler. "Are you saying you won't?" "Of course I'm not." Fowler crossed his arms as Alex stopped the group near a ladder leading down from the platform. It was a good place for a boat to come alongside, although there was no way to get suitcases to the water 14 feet down. Oops. "Navy Oiler 6, this is Naval Detachment Armistice Station, calling you on Channel 16, over." Steph spoke into the radio, her voice clipped and quick. Alex glanced her way, noting her tight features and stiff shoulders in the bright lights of the pier. "This is Oiler 6, roger. Break, am 1,000 yards out from Platform 3 with my boat at the rail, over." "Oiler 6, we're halfway down the pier and awaiting your boat." Steph lowered the radio and pointed. "I think that's them out there." Alex squinted into the dark. Spotting one ship's lights against the horizon was hard at night, worse when standing on a well-lit pier. He thought he could see a pair of masthead lights and a starboard running light, but there was no way to tell if they were Navy lights. "You sure?" "Not positive, but—" A sharp ringing filled the air, and Alex's head snapped around to find the sound. What the hell is Britannia doing? "Get down!" Steph dragged him with her as she dropped flat. Alex's right knee slammed into the pier, making him grunt. "Those are salvo warning alarms!" Alex opened his mouth to ask what the hell those were when fire like daylight blossomed, illuminating the frigate's stern like noon in Texas. He stared helplessly as two of Britain's VLS hatches snapped open, and missiles roared into the air. 28. Sucker Punch. As 12 MiGs burned toward the Enterprise strike group, Captain Rosario's still, cool voice came over the tactical net. "All stations, Echo Whiskey, engage MiGs with ESSM only if they break through the fighter screen, over." Lieutenant Commander Attar acknowledged the order with wide eyes. Nancy swore under her breath. "If those fighters can't kill them, we're going to get sucker punched." "Yes, ma'am, we are." Attar licked his lips, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. "Well, we'll know one way or another in about 3 minutes." Nancy shrugged, and then she raised her voice. "Look alive, ladies and gentlemen. If we get leakers, we won't have much time to respond." The MiGs came in high, diving down through the clouds to meet the 9 F-35s. This time, however, they didn't wait to close the range and fire their anti-air missiles. The Indian fighters opened with KH-29MP anti-ship missiles. Each MiG carried 2, and 4 fired before the American pilots caught on and fired their AMRAAMs. 18 AMRAAM missiles streaked into the air, and the F-35 pilots hit their afterburners to close the range before firing 18 more. The MiGs went evasive, and the incoming threat distracted most of the pilots from attacking the strike group. 2, however, held course long enough to fire another 2 KH-29MP anti-ship missiles each. Vampire, vampire, vampire! 10 Kludge missiles inbound on the strike group, Fletcher's air warfare coordinator reported. All units, Echo Whiskey, active linked doctrine over. Nancy hit 3 keys on her weapons console and waited. The KH-29MP was too fast for even Aegis to determine which ship the missiles were aimed at. From 20 nautical miles away, the missiles needed less than 2 minutes to reach the strike group. 2 minutes was a long time in anti-air warfare, however long enough for Fletcher's AN Spy-6 V1 phased array radar to track every incoming missile. Fletcher's link connection then fed that information to the strike group, complementing tracks from Bella Wood's identical radar and Kidd's smaller AN Spy-6 V4. Enterprise had the less capable AN Spy-3 radar, so Fletcher's Aegis system gave less weight to those tracks, although it synergized that track information into the link too. What resulted was a cohesive track picture using 4 different high-quality radars. All 4 ships knew where the enemy missiles were to within inches. Unfortunately, the cruiser and 4 destroyers only had 13 SM-6s and 60 ESSM between them. Those numbers sounded high, until you remembered that any countermissile only got 1 shot at an incoming threat. The KH-29MP would hit a ship before even an ESSM could turn to chase. All ships activated Doctrine, putting Bella Wood's baseline 12.2 Aegis weapon system in the driver's seat. The cruiser's super-fast brain understood their missile shortage and chose which ship to fire. Linked Aegis Doctrine had never been tested outside of software validation and training. It was that new, but they had no choice. The shooters didn't have enough missiles left to fight the conventional way. They would have to let Bella Wood's Aegis system dole out missiles and hope it could destroy every threat. Fletcher's computers responded to the remote command and put 4 ESSMs in the air. Kidd at Enterprise launched none. Kidd was down to only 8 ESSMs. Enterprise, 4. Bella Wood had 22 available after the misfired missile in her forward VLS bank, and her computer launched 6 of those, followed by 2 more when the first 2 missed their targets. Fletcher leaned port as Ying Mei put her into a hard turn from the bridge, again closing the distance with Enterprise as the destroyer's Sea-Whiz mounts started firing. Nancy heard the extended fart down in combat, although she couldn't hear Enterprise's Sea-Whiz join in. Kidd and Bella Wood's Sea-Whiz targeted the missiles as well, tracer rounds lighting up the night sky. Then a trio of KH-29MP missiles junked up and dodged the American missiles. Kidd fired 4 ESSMs as her aft Sea-Whiz mount slewed wildly to engage the threat. Nancy cringed. Doctrine didn't fire those missiles. A nervous watchstander overrode the system, and none of the missiles could intercept the 2 KH-29s aimed at Kidd. Instead, they spiraled into the sky, looking for targets. The destroyer's Sea-Whiz got 1. The other slammed into Kidd's aft missile deck. Kidd rocked with the blow, fire spewing out of her deck and filling the air with thick black smoke. A third KH-29 dove low to the deck, sprinted past Kidd and struck Enterprise above the waterline, 3/4 of the way down her port side. A chorus of panicked voices announced those hits over the net as the last KH-29 missiles died. Meanwhile, 3 Lightnings went down, exchanged for 6 of the MiGs when air-to-air missiles crossed paths with one another in the sky. Chased by missiles, the remaining MiGs bugged out towards the Indian strike group. But Bella Wood ordered the 6 Lightnings left to stay on combat air patrol instead of hunting them down. Nancy finally remembered to breathe, and then called the bridge. "XO, Captain, report damage." Commander Ying Mei's smile was audible. "We've got a little debris forward, possibly a missile fragment. Bunch of shell casings from Sea-Whiz. Otherwise, nothing." Nancy opened her mouth to respond, but a voice on the tactical net cut her off. "All stations, Enterprise. My max speed is 20 knots, over." Enterprise, Echo Bravo, roger, break, immediate execute, formation speed, 20 knots, over. Fletcher, roger, out, Nancy replied around the lump in her throat, then picked up the still active line to the bridge, whispering, "Shit, we'll never catch them at 20 knots. And we're still out of range for harpoons," Ying replied. "You think Enterprise can launch more fighters at this speed?" Nancy gritted her teeth. "Not enough wind over the deck. We can't take another attack like this, ma'am. We're down to what, 8 SM-6s? 7, Nancy glanced at her display, and 22 ESSM. Bella Wood's got to be worse, and Kidd looks like trash, Ying said. She's listing port and on fire aft. Nothing's coming out of her aft VLS. Probably never again. We've got more missiles left than the cruiser, Nancy swallowed. More than anyone, now. On the bright side, the Indians have to be about out of missiles, right? Ying didn't sound hopeful. Nancy swallowed and said a silent prayer. Ying was right. Earhart, this is Kansas Actual. We are 40 nautical miles out from you and closing, Kennedy said. We will cover your retreat from Armistice Station, over. Master Chief Casey tried to ignore his captain's pompous smile. Kennedy's fury over being rerouted towards Armistice Station wouldn't stop him from playing the hero, would it? Oh no, not this prick. Kansas's attack center was quiet, and not because it was the middle of the night. None of the watchstanders wanted to poke their irate captain. Kennedy spent the last 20 minutes pacing while he waited for someone to reach Amelia Earhart on a secure communications net. Finally, they found a satellite uplink that broke through the inexplicable jamming near Armistice Station, but Kennedy grumbled about how that required Kansas slowing to stream her communications wire. He perked up a bit when Earhart told him she planned to evacuate the entire Armistice Station naval detachment. Kennedy leaned forward upon hearing that something was wrong on Armistice Station, but Casey wasn't holding his breath. Sure, something could be wrong on the station, but that shouldn't mean Kansas would do anything other than escort Earhart away from trouble. Holy shit, Kansas, we're... Static filled the net as the transmission cut off without warning. What the hell? Kennedy whirled to glare at the radio watch. What the fuck happened to my transmission, Jin? Petty Officer Jin shrugged. Circuit's still open, Captain. Something must have gone wrong on their end. That's not acceptable. Get them back. Aye, Captain. Jin turned to his station before rolling his eyes. Casey spotted it, but he wasn't saying nothing. He stepped forward. Captain, you want to come up to periscope depth and use the radio mast? And slow even more? No! Kennedy crossed his arms. Jin said the problem was on their end. I'm sure those civilians forget to maintain their gear all the time. Maybe, Casey shrugged, not believing a word. The Civmars who ran the Navy's oilers were a professional bunch, not to mention better paid than the junior enlisted sailors who did maintenance on Navy ships and submarines. Maybe we can see if there's anything on bridge to bridge using the wire? That's an excellent idea, Cobb, Kennedy smiled. Do it, Jin. Already on it, sir. Channel 16 up. More static. Then, Mayday, 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 this is USNS Amelia Earhart. We have been struck by 2 French missiles and... The transmission cut off again. This time, no further transmission followed. Boosters ignited. 2 of Britain's missile hatches flipped open. The flight time for the pair of Exocet MM-40 Block 3 missiles was less than 15 seconds. Earhart was so close that the Block 3 Exocets fired never reached their cruising speed of 600 knots, and the missiles barely transitioned to cruise. Instead, they arced up into the air and then came straight down, blazing towards the American supply ship. Earhart was designed to sport 2 Sea Whiz guns, but no one armed Navy supply ships in peacetime. A Phalanx Block 1B Sea Whiz cost $5.6 million per mount, and the brackets were empty. Paranoia made Earhart's Navy Security Detachment man 3 of her 50-caliber machine gun mounts, but they were about as effective as spitballs against subsonic missiles. Earhart's master on the bridge scarcely had time to realize there were missiles in the air before they hit. Both struck Earhart's flight deck. One failed to explode, ricocheting off the deck and into the port helo hangar, ripping the door off its hinges and burrowing into the SH-60 helicopter inside. The helicopter, fully fueled, burst into flames. But that wasn't the worst of it. The other missile's 364-pound warhead burned through the flight deck and exploded inside the enclosed fantail, fragments ripping through mooring equipment before its fireball melted 3 bulkheads forward and 2 below. The blast opened Earhart's starboard side to the sea, and she started to list. Now, she was easy to pick out against the night sky and lights around Armistice Station. Alex, still on one knee, turned to stare at the conflagration. "Dear fucking God," he whispered. Fowler whimpered something about this being impossible, telling Gage this couldn't happen. No one would dare. Hamilton's silence screamed disbelief. Steph, next to Alex, seemed frozen. Bradshaw and Olson, too. Everyone gaped as Earhart burned, flames growing bright against the night sky. This had to be a nightmare. French frigates didn't launch missiles by accident. The bridge-to-bridge radio Steph dropped crackled. "Mayday, mayday, mayday, this is USNS Amelia Earhart. We have been struck by 2 missiles and are burning. My location is 1,000 yards northeast of Armistice Station, Platform 3. Request immediate assistance." Earhart's boat was still in the water, a black silhouette against the orange-red flames of her mothership. It turned back towards the supply ship, racing to provide the only help it could. "Mayday, mayday, mayday, this is USNS Amelia Earhart." A screaming alarm drowned out the mayday call, and Alex's head snapped around just in time to watch Breton launch 2 more missiles. These 2 shot into the night sky before coming back down for Earhart, and as much as Alex wanted to look away, he watched in terrified fascination while the 2 exocets slammed down into Earhart's bow. Both exploded. Earhart rocked in the water, rolling left and then right before listing still further to starboard. Small black figures ran around on her deck, some on fire, and others jumping into the water. Smoke billowed around the ship, drifting towards the group on the pier just 1,000 yards away. Earhart's boat darted into the inferno, dodging a white life raft canister. Earhart would sink. Alex didn't have to know much about surface ships to guess that. But why? Why would the French open fire? "Les voilà!" The shout came from down the pier. When Alex turned, he saw Camille Dubois leading a group of Marines. She pointed, and the Marines surged forward. Jesus, they're coming for us. Why no longer mattered. The tightness in his chest became a roar of terror. "Let's go!" Alex dragged Steph to her feet, then reached out to do the same for Admiral Hamilton. She was already up, fury making her face white as she yanked Fowler off the ground. He yelped. No one cared. "Come on!" Fowler pointed at the French Marines, who were at the elevator bank. "But they're... this way!" Alex shoved anyone in reach towards the end of the pier, away from the Marines. "Someone help me!" Fowler struggled to pull his suitcase along until Bradshaw kicked it aside. The suitcase bounced off a bollard, almost tripping Gage as he hauled his own luggage forward. "Forget the fucking suitcases, sir!" "But..." A push from Bradshaw made Fowler cut off in a howl. "Gun!" Montero shouted. "There!" Crack. Shots rang out, and 3 people went down. 29. First Blood. Struck by what? Kennedy wheeled on Petty Officer Jin. What the fuck did they just say? Faces in control were sheet white. Master Chief Casey felt cold seeping into his bones. No way. No fucking way had a longtime American ally just shot a U.S. Navy ship. Hell, their friendship with France went back to the goddamned Revolution. This was insane. Kennedy snatched the bridge-to-bridge handset from Jin. Earhart, this is Navy Warship 802. Say again your last. Over. Static. Kennedy repeated himself. Then again, louder. Nothing. What the fucking fuck is this? Kennedy twisted to glare at Casey. Did they say French missiles? Casey shrugged. Fuck if I know, sir, but it's gotta be wrong. We're still friends with the French, right? We were yesterday. Kennedy shook his head like a punch-drunk fighter. 2 missiles would tear the fuck out of an oiler. They don't have a lot of defenses. They don't have jack, you mean, sir? I did a tour on one, Casey replied. They don't even have Sea Whiz. Shit. Kennedy slumped. Casey did the math. A Lewis and Clark-class ship's crew was about the same size as Kansas, and almost all civilians. Sir, if they shot at Earhart, then we fucking find whatever French ship did that and send them to the bottom. Kennedy turned to the chief of the watch. Set battle stations, retrieve the wire, and make best speed for Armistice Station. INS Vishal was down to 8 megs. 6 of them were from the last strike and had to land to rearm and refuel before heading back towards the enemy. 2 were survivors of the first attack. The Indian carrier turned into the wind to recover them, but 4 of her escorting destroyers, those with BrahMos missiles left, continued toward the American strike group at 35 knots. So far, the Indian strike group shot 76 of their 96 BrahMos missiles at the Americans. Indian fighters added 28 KH-29MP missiles, in exchange for sinking USS John Finn and hitting Enterprise twice. 18 of Vishal's 24 fighters were shot down, but the Indian admiral knew they would face a lopsided hit-to-missile ratio in the first salvos. That was why 4 destroyers, Ganja, Rana, Ranveer, and Mormugao, kept 5 missiles apiece. Now, they closed the distance to increase accuracy and decrease flight time. Vishal would keep the 8 MiGs in reserve. All the Indian destroyers' air defenses were intact, and their admiral knew that the Americans used the same missiles for air defense as they did to attack aircraft. One more missile attack would guarantee that the Americans had nothing left to shoot down the MiGs. Encrypted communications flashed between the Indian carrier and her escorts, and INS Porbandar, still just 30 miles away from the Americans. Bradshaw cried out. Olsen lunged for him, dragging him behind an orange shipping container on the pier near the yacht. It hid them nicely. Shipping containers were the size of train cars and made of durable steel. Alex grabbed Montero, the closer security officer, but by the time he pulled him to safety, the trail of blood behind him proved Alex was too late. Montero took 2 shots to the throat and 1 to the head, which was half severed, dangling by skin and bits of something unidentifiable. Bile rose in Alex's throat, and he almost puked. Meanwhile, Steph and Admiral Hamilton pulled Dixon behind the container. The second security officer had 2 holes in his chest, and his every breath gurgled. Alex attended first responder training at the Naval Diving and Salvage Training Center a lifetime ago. Bullet wounds weren't on the curriculum, but he didn't need a degree to tell Dixon's wounds were fatal. Bullets ricocheted off the container, making a metallic ping, ping, ping noise as Alex cringed and ducked. Someone swore. He fought the urge to crawl beneath the nearest object and hide. This wasn't what he was trained for. Wasn't supposed to happen. His head swirled, and his breathing was short. 1,000 times worse than it had been when he knew Chris Kennedy was about to kill a bunch of innocent civilians. Take my gun, Dixon panted. "There's 2 spare magazines in my jacket." He coughed up blood, spraying Steph right in the face. "Same for Montero." Alex's shaking hands moved to pull 2 magazines out of the inner pocket of Montero's jacket, trying to ignore the blood and the way Dixon's breath rattled. Steph did the same for Dixon, who tried to say something else, only for his eyes to roll back and his breathing to stop. Montero's handgun felt heavy in Alex's palm. He had to pry it out of Montero's still warm fingers, swallowing back yet another urge to vomit. It wasn't the standard Navy 9mm Beretta he shot 2 whole times a year, and Alex couldn't find the safety. Did it have one? "Need some help here," Olson said. Alex turned to see Olson applying pressure on Bradshaw's upper left arm. Bradshaw's face was stark white, and he sweated in the cold night air, swearing at Olson through gritted teeth. Everyone stared at one another with wide eyes, but footsteps were coming, and Alex had to do something. Steph watched the French. Alex forced his wooden legs to work, crossing to Gage's suitcase. Fowler's aide dragged it behind the container like an idiot, but now it was useful. Throwing the suitcase open, Alex hunted for something that would work as a bandage. "Hey, that's mine!" Gage started forward, only for another ping-ping-ping of bullets to hit the container. He dropped flat. Crack! Steph leaned around the edge of the container to return fire. Gage and Fowler flinched away from the sound as Alex pulled 3 cotton shirts out of the suitcase. "Here," he extended the pistol to Olson. She was a gunner's mate, presumably better trained for this than a guy who spent his career in submarines. "Help ops." "You got it, sir." Olson scurried over to Steph's side as Alex looked at Bradshaw's wound. There was too much blood to tell if the bullet passed through or clipped Bradshaw's upper arm, so Alex just wrapped the arm in a shirt and tied it off as fast as he could. "You gonna pass out on me, Bradshaw?" "You think it might scare the French off, sir?" Bradshaw's smile was tight. "Come out with your hands up," Camille Dubois shouted. Alex couldn't see her on the other side of the container, but her voice still sent a chill down his spine. "Come out and we will not shoot." Gage shuffled closer. "What are we waiting for? We have to listen, right? They have guns." "So do we." Olson twisted to glare at him. "And if those ass clowns opened with shooting, what the ever fucking fuck makes you think they'll stop?" Gage's mouth dropped open, but no sound emerged. Steph peeked around the edge of the container. "They're holding about 50 yards away." She didn't look back. "What's our move, boss?" Alex glanced around. Only Bradshaw was hurt. Gage looked ready to faint, and Fowler seemed offended by the whole business, but they were unharmed. Hamilton's expression was unreadable, but her brown eyes burned holes in Alex every time he glanced her way. Next to Alex, Bradshaw squirmed, hissing in pain. "There's a hatch down at the end of the pier," Bradshaw grimaced. "No elevators, but there's a bunch of storerooms that have stairs going down." "Beats going towards the bastards," Olson said. "We can't," Gage started again, only for the sudden whirring of a machine gun to cut him off. Light flashed from Alex's left. Was that? Holy shit, it was! Earhart's boat roared back towards the pier, spraying the French Marines with fire from their bow-mounted 50 caliber machine gun. Cries filled the air. Someone screamed as the boat did a second pass. "Come on," Alex pulled Bradshaw up. "Everyone, let's move. Bradshaw, get to that hatch." Gage hesitated until Hamilton shoved him forward. The admiral dragged Fowler along, ignoring his inarticulate protests. Alex lagged back, shouting for Steph and Olson to join them as the French started firing back at Earhart's boat. The boat danced away, out of easy range of the French Marines' rifles, and then motion caught Alex's eye. Still sprinting, he turned just in time to see Bretagn's 76mm Auto Malara training to the frigate's port side. The Auto-Malara was a tried-and-true weapon, used as an anti-air or anti-surface gun by over 40 navies worldwide. Britain's advanced variant of the gun fired up to 120 rounds per minute. She only needed 9. The first 3 rounds splashed into the water around Earhart's boat as the civilian coxswain firewalled the throttles and tried to run. The 3 Navy personnel in the boats shouted for her to close the pier, but she didn't understand they wanted her to get inside the Auto-Malara's minimum range. Instead, she sent the boat skipping over the waves toward the open ocean, which allowed Britain's next 3-round burst to straddle the boat. The coxswain tried driving in a zigzag pattern, but the French frigate had their number. 2 of the next 3 rounds exploded in the air right over Earhart's boat, shredding the 5 sailors inside and popping the boat's inflated sponsons. Alex never saw what else happened to those sailors. Hamilton helped Bradshaw wrench open the hatch, shoving Fowler through first. Gage kicked down his damned suitcase before following, and then Bradshaw squirmed down the ladder one-armed. Alex was last through, yanking the heavy metal door down and dropping into a still dark room. Enterprise's best limping speed was 20 knots, which gave the Indian destroyers 15 knots of overtake. Somehow, Kidd managed the same speed, despite the fires burning on her aft end. John had never been on an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, but he imagined a lot of critical systems were in the stern, things like engines and steering. Could Kidd keep up the pace? And could he do anything to help her crew save the ship? He scowled. "If they're chasing us, they've got some missiles left, Admiral," he said. McNally wasn't much use during the battle, but it turned out they didn't need him. Captain Rosario on Bella Wood commanded the strike group's air defense, and John knew she was the reason 4 ships remained afloat. John tried to follow the air battle with his limited knowledge, and from where he was sitting, they'd done okay. There'd be hell to pay for losing Finn, but the strike group started outnumbered, surprised, and with their communications jammed. Even the U.S. Navy had bad days. "We need to find the jammer," he said. McNally turned to him. "It's got to be an aircraft." The Admiral sighed. "With all the civilian air traffic up there, we don't dare shoot." "Unless it's that destroyer that keeps shadowing us. They've got to be hanging out so close for a reason." John's eyes narrowed. "Admiral, we need to kill her." McNally shook his head. "Absolutely not. This might be the work of one lunatic commander. If we shoot at a ship that hasn't shot at us, we're starting a war." "Sir, I think they already have," John whispered. "Echo Bravo, this is Echo Whiskey." Captain Rosario's voice blared out of the speaker to John's left. "Recommend killing track 7065 with bulldogs, over." McNally's face went red. "What the hell are you two conspiring at?" He grabbed a headset before John could answer. "Echo Whiskey, Echo Bravo Actual. Negative. Do not kill track 7065. We will not shoot at a unit that has not opened fire, over." John swallowed. He hadn't chatted the idea over to Captain Rosario on Bella Wood on a secure computer, but he would have if the thought occurred to him. McNally tore his headset off and twisted to glare at his staff. "The next person who tries to tell me to shoot that fucking destroyer gets to swim home, is that understood?" "Vampire, vampire, vampire!" The tactical net filled with Nancy Coleman's voice again. "Inbound missiles bearing 100. All stations, Echo Whiskey. Estimate 18 missiles inbound. Remain on active link doctrine. Out." John felt his hands shake. He didn't know how Rosario kept her voice so calm, but he did know that 18 inbound missiles were more than the entire strike group had standard missiles remaining. Fletcher had the most with 7 SM-6s. Bella Wood only had 5. Enterprise was down to just 4 ESSM. Same for Kidd. Fletcher and Bella Wood still had 36 ESSMs between them, but ESSMs were short-ranged. They only allowed for 1 shot at each incoming BrahMos missile. Any Indian admiral with a brain would aim for Enterprise. She was the prize, and John was a helpless passenger. All he could do was watch and pray the shooters could intercept those missiles in time. 30. Winchester. The hatch slammed shut, cutting off what little light came from the outside world, more than there should have been with Earhart burning, and leaving them in musty darkness. The smell of water and plastic invaded Freddy's nostrils. Lovely. "Someone might want to find a light switch before we fall down a hole," she said. "I got it," Bradshaw said. Freddy tried to find him in the dark, but she couldn't even see shadows. She hadn't been able to see much before climbing down the ladder either, just enough to know that the room was long and full of something. Someone whispered. She couldn't catch the words. Freddy didn't like the way her breath rattled in her ears, growing louder and louder with each passing moment. She wasn't afraid of the dark, but being shut in a semi-submerged storeroom was a novel experience. She was a goddamned admiral. Admirals didn't get nervous. "What the fuck did they think they were doing?" Steph asked, her voice echoing. "Starting a war," Coleman said. "Not necessarily." Freddy's voice sounded harsh and alien to her own ears. Sinking a ship owned by the U.S. Navy should guarantee that, but Freddy knew her history, knew that shots fired didn't always mean war. The seizure of USS Pueblo and the attack on USS Liberty disproved that theory. Maybe Freddy had been an admiral too long. She looked at things from too much of a distance. An American officer was killed minutes ago. Then an American ship ate 4 missiles in front of her face. What else did it take to get to war? But France? They'd been friends with France from before there was a United States to be friendly. The lights flickered on, illuminating a long and narrow room full of plastic-wrapped pallets in eerie yellow. To Freddy's right were cereal and potatoes. The left had coffee creamer, rice, and charcoal, followed by 3 pallets stacked high with cases of Jim Beam and Jack Daniels. She scowled. Definitely a cruise ship's loadout. "Everyone okay?" Coleman asked. Freddy bit back the need to swear at him, to blame this troublemaker for everything. The knee-jerk instinct to vilify Alex Coleman died, however. The desire to strangle a politician did not. "Where are we?" Fowler demanded. "A cargo loading bay. Cranes pull these pallets out to load them on ships," Bradshaw said. "Sorry for the grunge, was the best I had on short notice." "We shouldn't be hiding," Fowler snapped. "I'm sure if I could just reason with those people, someone would set things right." "By lifting Earhart off the ocean floor and bringing her dead crew back to life?" Coleman snorted. "Yeah, let me know how that works out." You! Enough!" Freddy cut in, and then twisted to look at Coleman. "You have a plan, Commander?" "The storerooms connect under the platform." He glanced around. "We should be able to take a ladder down, right, Bradshaw?" "Yeah, I've done it before." Bradshaw's quick smile was ghostly in his drawn face. "Better question," Steph said, pointing up. "Do those giant-ass cargo doors open from the inside or the outside?" Distant shouting in French came from above before Bradshaw shrugged, one-shouldered. "Dunno. Lieutenant Lynn would've." Everyone went silent. Freddy swallowed. She hadn't known Jesse Lynn well, nor paid him much mind. But now he was dead. A dead naval officer on a station in the middle of the Indian Ocean when the French suddenly started shooting. The world was upside down. Was Maria okay? She'd never forgive herself if Maria got hurt. I didn't think there might be danger when I let her go out there. Regret threatened to make her dizzy. "We'd better get out of here before we find out," Coleman said. "Bradshaw, find the down ladder." Looking now, sir, Bradshaw replied. Olson went to help him, and Freddie eyed the pistol in her hand. Was she a good choice to hold one of their 2 firearms? Freddie couldn't even remember her rate. Hopefully, Olson wasn't a knuckle-dragging bosun's mate who'd forget to put the gun on safe. I still don't understand what's going on, Fowler said. We need to negotiate and... With all due respect, Mr. Secretary, that hole in Bradshaw's arm doesn't seem very fucking reasonable. Coleman's voice was harder than Freddie imagined it could be. I can't stop you if you want to go up there and get your ass shot off, but do the rest of us the courtesy of waiting until we're gone. Fowler went red. I'm not going up there alone. Then shut your face. Freddie earned herself a shocked glare. This isn't the time for stupid arguments. There's no need to be insulting, Admiral, Fowler sneered, and she could see him making mental notes concerning her career prospects. Screw him. Freddie turned away, looking for a hatch in the floor to match the one they'd climbed through. She crossed behind 2 pallets, stepping over a giant power cord that looked like it belonged to a ship's shore power configuration. 3 pallets of fresh fruit and 1 of energy drinks blocked her path next. Zigzagging back towards the ladder they'd come down, she tripped over something in the shadows and fell to her knees. What the hell? Freddie twisted, spotting the offending object. Damn, her ankle hurt. You brought your suitcase down here? Gage wilted. I thought... It has important papers in it. Someone pounded on the hatch, and Gage skittered back. Open the hatch now, a female voice demanded. Open, or we will execute anyone we find. Execute. The word made Freddie freeze. Even if they were at war, that wasn't a legitimate course of action for the French. The world wasn't supposed to work like this. Surrender wasn't an option, never had been, but where the hell were they going to hide? Freddie hated not knowing things. Block that hatch the best you can, Steph. Coleman's orders broke through Freddie's fog. Olson, watch the hatch with ops. Bradshaw, help me break open this pallet of coffee creamer. Boss, I know you love your coffee, but this is weird, even for you. But Bradshaw tromped over to join Coleman as Freddie blinked. What are you doing, Commander? Science. His grin was brief as Coleman upended Gage's suitcase and dumped clothes, papers, a tablet, and 2 plastic bottles out onto the floor. This stuff's non-dairy. She stared. What the ever-loving hell does that have to do with anything? Sodium aluminosilicate is flammable. I'm going to cook up a surprise for our friends. His smile vanished. Just need a few ingredients and a little time. The pounding on the hatch intensified as Gage snatched his tablet from the pile, gripping it in white-knuckled hands. Freddie frowned. You think they'll give you that time? She asked. Hatch is sealed from the inside, Steph said, twisting to look at them. And I thought you liked your coffee black, sir. Coleman chuckled, throwing can after can of the creamer into his backpack. I do, but my wife loves this shit. Is there any charcoal around here? Freddie frowned. 3 pallets left of you. She could have offered to grab some, but she still didn't know what this idiot would do with it. Freddie was a nuclear engineer, too, but nuke school was a long time ago. Besides, the instructors at Prototype stressed not making things explode. Chemistry at the academy was even further in her past. She liked facts and numbers, not whatever this was. Coleman darted over to grab a bag of charcoal and then pulled the plastic bottles out of the mess of Gage's clothes, shoving them in his backpack too. Let's get out of here. I'll set the trap on the next level. Trap? Freddie's eyes went wide. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Coleman stopped to look her in the eye. Ma'am, if you've got better ideas, I'm all for them. All I've got is this. He gestured with the Nalgene bottle. We've got to run, and maybe this'll slow them down. Maybe it won't. It's your call. You're the ranking officer. He was smart enough to dump this on her, wasn't he? But Freddie Hamilton never shrank away from responsibility. She wouldn't be the highest-ranking female submariner in U.S. Navy history if she did. Freddie scowled. Do it. Let's go, folks. Coleman pointed at the hatch, leading down. Staff, take point. You got it, boss. Steph pulled the hatch open. This is starting to feel like CQB training back at the Wick. She disappeared down the hatch, slithering down the ladder with athleticism Freddie envied. I need to get to the gym more. And what the hell was the Wick? Yeah, except this is a lot less fun. Coleman glanced at Bradshaw. You good with ladders? With execution as the alternative? You bet your ass I am, sir. Bradshaw reached out and grabbed Gage. Come on, Butto, you're with me. Leave the fucking suitcase this time. Gage squeaked, but didn't protest. Freddie gestured Fowler ahead of her, ignoring his dirty look. Did the idiot still think there was a diplomatic solution to this mess? If the United States' honor would survive it, she'd leave him behind. But she refused to give any enemy a goddamned Undersecretary of State. She followed Fowler, and her feet barely hit the ground in the next room before a backpack dropped from above. You're insane! Freddie shouted up at Coleman. You almost dropped that on my head. Sorry, Admiral. He sounded like he was grinning. Freddie sighed. 1 minute, Fletcher's air warfare coordinator announced. Nancy sat very still, her calm expression disguising the nervous tingle running up her spine. Her ship was still the first on the threat axis, with the best shot at keeping missiles from hitting Enterprise. Protecting the carrier was the purpose of an air defense destroyer, but training never mentioned how terrifying it was in real life. Clearing her throat, Nancy keyed the mic for the bridge. OOD, Captain. Close with Enterprise. Captain, OOD. Current range is 800 yards. Make it 400. OOD, aye, the officer of the deck replied. Nancy bit her lip. Fletcher withstood 2 missile attacks from the Indians already, escaping relatively unscathed. She should have every reason to believe her ship and crew could survive another, but terror coiled up in Nancy's stomach, dark and dangerous. A Hollywood captain would say something inspirational to her people, but Nancy refused to distract them. Captain, surface, range is down to 82 nautical miles, her surface warfare coordinator said over the net. Nancy's eyes snapped down to the display. She was so wrapped around the incoming missiles that she forgot that the Indians kept closing them, and so had everyone else. She stomped down on the foot pedal microphone for the tactical net. All stations, Fletcher, initiating harpoon engagement out. Nancy swapped to her ship's internal net. Surface, Captain, target the 2 lead destroyers with 4 bulldogs per track. Surface, aye. Seconds ticked by. Nancy held her breath and watched the 16 BrahMos missiles close. Birds away, Air announced. 7 birds away. Doctrine swapping to ESSM. Bulldogs away, Surface reported a hair's breadth later. 8 bulldogs transitioning to cruise on lead Indian destroyers. Nancy bared her teeth, exchanging a vicious smile with her TAO. Your turn, assholes. All stations, Bellawood. Bulldogs away. Rosario's voice came over the tactical net a moment later, followed by the same report from Kidd. 24 Harpoon Block 2's extended-range missiles raced towards the Indian strike group, 8 each from Fletcher, Bellawood, and Kidd. The 2 newer ships each launched half their loadout. Kidd, older and without the ability to fire harpoons from her vertical launch system, fired all 8 harpoons stored in canisters on her stern. Their link connection ensured none of the ships chose the same targets, spreading the 24 anti-ship missiles out among the 6 destroyers accompanying the Indian aircraft carrier. Harpoons were slower than standard missiles, about half the speed, but they were fire-and-forget missiles. Those 24 harpoons would find those Indian destroyers no matter what happened to the ships that fired them. INS Vishal was a higher-value target, but its air wing was almost spent. Nancy and her fellow captains knew that. They'd save the carrier for their second harpoon attack. Fletcher and Bella Wood still had 8 harpoons each, enough to turn the carrier to toast, assuming they lived that long. Meanwhile, Fletcher's Aegis weapon system fought to defend the ship. Bella Wood remained the brain of the strike group, with her Aegis deciding which SM-6 took out which incoming missile. The 12 SM-6s Fletcher and Bella Wood launched took out 8 incoming missiles, but there were still too many. 10 BrahMos made it past the outer ring of defenses, and there just weren't enough ESSM left. Fletcher's missiles picked off 2, so did Bella Wood. Kidd's remaining 4 destroyed 1, and every missile Enterprise launched missed. Winchester, I say again, Kidd is Winchester, Kidd's captain, Commander Anka Walzak, said over the tactical net. Engaging with guns. All stations, Enterprise. Enterprise is Winchester, over. Well, that's great news, Nancy grimaced. Her TAO nodded choppily. Looks like it's up to us and Bella Wood now. Yeah. Nancy kept her calm expression in place with an effort. Would Fletcher run out of missiles next? A ship out of missiles was a sitting duck. 8 more ESSM launched at the last minute, a quartet each from Fletcher and Bella Wood, blasting out of their launch cells when the BrahMos missiles were less than 30 seconds from impact. That barely gave the missiles a chance to reach cruise altitude, but each missile still veered to intercept their assigned targets. Fletcher trembled as both of her Sea-Whiz mounts began firing in full auto mode, targeting the same 5 BrahMos missiles her ESSM were after. Unfortunately, 3 of the 5 went for Kidd. Like Fletcher, Kidd's close-in weapon systems were in full auto, round after round ripping out of their phalanx guns. Both destroyers' Sea-Whiz held 1,500 rounds in their magazines, which only allowed about 21 seconds of fire at 4,500 rounds per minute. That would have been enough, until Kidd's aft Sea-Whiz jammed. 2 missiles homed in on Kidd's dual helicopter hangars, burst through the doors, and incinerated both MH-60R helicopters inside. 1 missile wasted itself against the helo hangar's forward bulkhead, but the other, just a few seconds behind its friend, blasted through the hole the first missile made, and exploded against Kidd's aft bank of vertical launch cells. Kidd had no missiles left to fuel secondary explosions, but the carnage was bad enough. The missile's 440-pound warhead ripped through the destroyer's 64-cell VLS module like paper. A shockwave continued forward, tearing into Kidd's innards. The resulting inferno killed 3 out of every 4 sailors stationed in the back half of the ship, including every watchstander in main engine room number 2, auxiliary machinery room number 2, aft steering and repair 3. Meanwhile, Fletcher's proximity to Enterprise put her between the carrier and the last incoming missile. Enterprise carried short-ranged RIM-116 rolling airframe missiles for point defense, stored in 2 21-missile launchers. An earlier KH-29 hit took out the portside launcher, but the starboard launcher still had 7 missiles left. It spat 4 out as the last BrahMos came in, each reaching Mach 2 in under 10 seconds. Then the BrahMos missile executed its terminal pop-up maneuver, and one of the ram lost lock, instead zeroing in on Fletcher's aft Sea-Whiz mount. The phalanx radar on mount recognized the missile's changed profile and adjusted its targeting to the incoming American missile, but ram was too fast. The rounds sailed right past. Fletcher rocked forward as Enterprise's missile detonated on top of her aft Sea-Whiz mount, blasting the mount and the sailors waiting to reload it into smithereens. 2 lucky sailors went overboard more or less intact. The other 6 died instantly. Seconds later, 2 of Enterprise's other missiles intercepted a BrahMos. The other one burst past them and slammed into Enterprise's port side, 100 feet aft of the previous hit.